The Honourable the President.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we willingly acknowledge you as the Supreme Being, most gracious and most merciful. Look down, we beseech you, on us who are members of this Senate, and deign to assist us in the duties that we have to perform on behalf of our beloved country of Trinidad and Tobago. Open our eyes to see the truth, and help us to accept it with all its implications into our lives. Direct us, O Lord, in our deliberations, so that setting aside private interests, unwholesome prejudices, and personal affections, we may treat all matters set before us with honesty, courage, and conviction. Through all we say and do in this Senate, may we give glory and honor to your holy name, inspire confidence in our fellow citizens, and make a positive contribution to the peace and prosperity of our nation. Amen.
Announcements by the President.
Honourable Senators, I have granted leave of absence to Senator Stephen Creese and Senator Gerard Ramdeen, both of whom are out of the country. Honourable Senators, I have received the following correspondence from Her Excellency the President, Paula May Weeks. The Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago by Her Excellency Paula May Weeks, President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. To Mr. Elton Prescott, SC. Whereas Senator Stephen Creese is incapable of performing his duties as a senator by reason of his absence from Trinidad and Tobago, now therefore I, Paula May Weeks, President as aforesaid, in exercise of the power vested in me by Section 44(1)(a) and Section 44(4)(c) of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby appoint you, Elton Prescott, SC, Attorney at Law, to be temporarily a member of the Senate with effect from the 11th of May 2018 and continuing during the absence from Trinidad and Tobago of the said Senator Stephen Creese. Given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the Office of the President St. Anne's this 9th day of May 2018. To Mr. Eli Zakur, whereas Senator Gerard Ramdeen is incapable of performing his duties as a senator by reason of his absence from Trinidad and Tobago, now therefore I, Paula May Weeks, President as aforesaid, in exercise of the power vested in me by Section 44(1)(a) and Section 44(4)(b) of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, acting in accordance with the advice of the Leader of the Opposition, do hereby appoint you, Eli Zakur, to be temporarily a member of the Senate with effect from the 11th of May 2018 and continuing during the absence from Trinidad and Tobago of Senator Gerard Ramdeen. Given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the Office of the President St. Anne's this 11th day of May 2018. Honourable Senators, Senators are required to take the oath.
I, Elton Prescott, having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do swear by the Holy Bible that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago on which I am about to enter.
Having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do swear by Almighty God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, I will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago upon which I am about to enter.
Bills brought from the House of Representatives as listed on the supplemental order paper, the Finance, Supplementation and Variation of Appropriation, Financial Year 2018 Bill 2018, in the name of the Minister of Finance.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Madam President, in accordance with Standing Order 62(1)B, I beg to move that the next stage of the Finance, Supplemental and Variation of Appropriation, Financial Year 2018 Bill 2018 be taken on Tuesday, May 15th, 2018.
Honourable Senators, the question is that the next stage of the Finance, Supplementation and Variation of Appropriation, Financial Year 2018 Bill 2018 be taken on Tuesday, May the 15th, 2018. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. The next stage of the bill will be taken on Tuesday, May the 15th, 2018.
Papers.
Minister of Trade and Industry.
Madam President. Madam President, I have the honour to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper in my name. The audited consolidated financial statements of the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards for the year ended September 30th, 2014. The audited unconsolidated financial statements of the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards for the year ended September 30th, 2014. Thank you.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I have the honour to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper and supplemental order paper in the name of the Minister of Finance. The annual audited financial statements of Union Estate Electricity Generation Company Limited for the year ended December 31st, 2016. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Mayaro Rio Claro Regional Corporation for the year ended September 30, 2006. And the report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Mayor's Fund for the Shogunas Borough Corporation for the year ended September 30, 2014.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, I have the honour to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper and supplemental order paper in the name of the Minister of Social Development and Family Services, the Attorney General, the Minister of Public Administration and Communication, the Minister of Health, and the Minister of National Security. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services to the second report of the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration, second session 2016-2017, 11 Parliament, on an inquiry into the effectiveness of the state's intervention directed at socially displaced persons in Trinidad and Tobago. The annual report of the Police Complaints Authority for the period October 1st, 2016 to September 30th, 2017. The response of the Service Commission Department to the sixth report of the Joint Select Committee on Local Authorities, Service Commissions and Statutory Authorities, including the THA, second session 2016-2017, 11 Parliament, on an inquiry into the efficiency and effectiveness of the Teaching Service Commission, the TSC. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Health to the second report of the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration, second session 2016-2017, 11th Parliament, on an inquiry into the effectiveness of the state's intervention directed at socially displaced persons in Trinidad and Tobago. The ministerial response of the Ministry of National Security to the sixth report of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity, third session 2017-2018, 11th Parliament, on an examination of the impact on mental health and family life of remandees at the remand prison. Thank you, Madam President.
Reports from committees.
Senator Obika.
Thank you, Madam President. I have the honor to present the following reports, as listed on the supplemental order paper in my name, the 15th report of the Public Accounts Committee, third session 2017-2018, 11th Parliament, on the examination of the audited financial statements of the Water and Sewage Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, WASA, for the years 2008 to 2013, the 16th report of the Public Accounts Committee, third session 2017-2018, 11th Parliament, on the examination of the audited financial statements of the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission, TNTEC, for the years 2012 to 2015.
Urgent questions.
Senator Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. To the Honourable Minister of Education, what steps are being taken to address the issue of a defective sewer system and asbestos fragments on the compound of the Egypt Government Primary School? Point 14.
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam President. The Ministry of Education is in possession of a bill of quantities for the repair of the sewer system, and work will commence within the month. In December 2017, that's the answer to the second part, the Ministry of Education was advised that an abandoned government quarters situated close to the school had caught fire and that the building was covered with asbestos sheeting. The burnt sheeting can pose a hazard to the school population. The Ministry of Education is in consultation with SWIMCOL to provide technical assistance to remove the, technical assistance to remove the asbestos from the site. This matter is ongoing. Thank you.
Senator Mark.
Thank you, Madam President. Honourable Minister, in light of the danger to these students' health and well-being, could you advise this Senate what urgent steps, or when will this technical assistance be rendered in order to have whatever is threatening the health of these students be addressed?
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam President. The Ministry of Education, not having the requisite expertise, contacted SWIMCOL soon after that information was brought to our attention. In fact, on 2 occasions, soon after the fire occurred, we contacted SWIMCOL. SWIMCOL, I must say, was slow to respond, and we have been in contact with SWIMCOL almost on a daily basis. We have been assured by SWIMCOL that they are going to provide the necessary technical advice and expertise so that the burnt asbestos sheeting can be removed as quickly as possible. May I add that the removal of asbestos sheeting is something that cannot be done by an amateur. It involves and it needs the expertise or experts to do that, so that those who are engaged in the removal of the asbestos will not suffer any unpleasant circumstances. Thank you.
Senator Mark. Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Could the Honourable Minister indicate to us how soon, given the, let me just rephrase that, Madam President. As it relates to the defective sewer system, which has been impacting and affecting these pupils or students for some time now, can the Minister give the Senate the assurance that this matter will be addressed with some degree of expedition, having regard to the defective sewer system that has been there for some time now?
Minister of Education.
I will prefer if Senator Mark used the word urgency instead of expedition. Expedition gives a different connotation. Yes. Anyway, let me state that the information that is available to me tells me that the students are not in immediate danger. In fact, only this morning I was told by persons in our department that what has caused the concern is that there's some light that is associated with the system. And when that light goes on, it would give the impression that something is wrong, that there might be a choke. So we have the bill of quantities. We are going to effect repairs, but it does not pose an imminent danger. But it will be done with dispatch. Thank you very much.
Questions and notice. Questions for oral answer.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, the government is pleased to announce that it will be answering all questions on notice, save and accept question 111.
Senator Mark.
Thank you. Question number 104 to the Honourable Minister of Works and Transport.
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, the roll-on roll-off cargo ferry, the MV Cabo Star, is certified to transport 100 passengers and has cargo space for approximately 300 commercial vehicles. The vessel is equipped with 19 crew cabins, 12 passenger cabins, each containing 4 bulk beds, which passengers can reserve on board on the date of sailing. On deck 4, the passenger common area facilities include seating lounge outfitted with a big screen television, food and beverage cafeteria. Statistics from July 24, 2017 to March 31, 2018 show that the Cabo Star transported 29,267 passengers with a total of 392 trips for that period at an average of 75 passengers per trip. Likewise, 49,122 vehicles were transported with an average of 125 vehicles per trip on the sea bridge. While there may have been an increase in the number of passengers transported on the Cabo Star over the period January to March 2018, the vessel has never crossed its maximum passenger capacity of 100 passengers on any trip. The highest average passenger count per trip recorded was 86 passengers in August 2017. The vessel, by maritime law, cannot go over the maximum passenger capacity of the vessel. And to ensure passenger safety on board, the following measures are in place. Crew members are trained for emergency response. Crew members throughout the vessel are equipped with radios, internal phone system for crew to communicate, adequate signage indicating evacuation plan, areas of access and various cautions to passengers, PA system on board for announcements and to be used in the case of emergency, adequate life-saving equipment on board for passengers and crew. At no time since the commencement of operations of the Cabo Star on the sea bridge has the safety of passengers and crew members been compromised. I thank you, Madam.
Senator Mark.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Is the Minister aware that the whole issue of safety and comfort by passengers who would use that particular vessel have been the subject of a lot of criticisms, particularly from the Truckers Association, Truckers and Hauliers Association, over the period that he has referred to. Are you aware that they have been making and submitting serious complaints about their safety?
Minister of Works
Thank
and
you. Madam
Transport.
Speaker, I'm sorry, Madam President, I just left here at 2 o'clock this morning, so I was a bit confused. Madam President, I am also aware that there are several players in the Seabridge who, in my opinion, may have different agendas. So I'm not surprised there have been complaints, but we have also received commendations from many people who use the cargo vessel. Thank you.
Senator Mark.
Can I ask the Honourable Minister if he would be kind enough to inform the Senate of the various players that use that particular vessel who may, in his opinion, based on what he has said, Madam President, have their own agendas or different agendas? Would you want to share with this Senate what you mean by it?
Minister.
I will not want to go into that conversation in the Senate, but this conversation would have been in the public domain for quite a while. And if the Honourable Senator maybe don't keep clippings from the newspaper, I'll make some available to him. Thank you.
Senator Mark.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, is the Minister aware that several reports have emerged from persons using that vessel of the inadequate facilities, particularly those that are needed by passengers at crucial periods during the journey between Port of Spain and Scarborough, particularly washroom facilities being inadequate?
Minister.
Madam Speaker, there's another question on washroom facilities, so I'll wait to answer about the washroom facilities. Sorry, Madam President, on the other question.
Sure.
The issue of during the cruise ship period. Madam President, let me put on the records, the problem with the cruise ship periods has nothing to do with the vessel. It has challenges to do with the berthing at the port in Port of Spain and Tobago. Until the infrastructure has been fixed at the port, because of the size of the vessel, we have to leave the vessels out of the port while cruise ships are inland. It has nothing to do with the vessel. However, Madam President, having said that, just to remind the Honourable House that when the Cabo Star came in, it came in on a one-year contract. NITCO have gone out for another tender for a more suitable vessel. That tender was unsuccessful, and as we speak, NITCO is in the process of going out for a second tender, and the Cabo Star would have been renewed for a 6-month period. The government recognized that the Cabo Star is not the ideal vessel. However, a responsible government cannot afford to leave the sea bridge without a cargo vessel at this point in time. Thank you.
Senator Mark.
Madam President, could the Honourable Minister indicate, in light of the size of this particular vessel, is it the intention of the government to embark upon a project of dredging in the harbour to facilitate not that vessel, but other vessels as you seek to develop, and attract new customers to the shores of this country?
Senator Mark, I won't allow that question.
Okay.
Next question, Senator Mark.
Question number 105 to the Honourable Prime Minister.
Minister of State in the Office of the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam President. On January 31st, 2018, the Children's Authority responded to a report that a child with severe special needs was being physically abused and made to sleep outdoors. The child was removed from the home overnight and placed in the care of a fit person. This was done after the fit person and the physical property where the child would reside were assessed to determine suitability to care for and accommodate the child. During the visit, a parenting training session was done to provide the fit person and her family with tools to stabilize the child in his new environment. As is customary, the authority conducted a needs assessment of the child, and it was ascertained that he required specialized intervention, which is not provided by the authority. Since the authority works with several partners in the social services sector, relevant providers were identified and several referrals were made to obtain a psycho-educational assessment, vocational rehabilitation services, and parent training. While these services are being outsourced, the authority remains in close contact with the fit person, communicating with her on a weekly basis. During a recent visit to the home of the fit person, a clinical psychologist accompanied the team and conducted a session with the child. It was then determined that the child was not in need of critical therapeutic intervention, that is, not in need of urgent counseling, but would benefit from immediate psychoeducation. The sessions for the child to be conducted by the Children's Authority clinical psychologist commenced on April 5, 2018. The fit person will also benefit from some sessions to assist her in caring for a child with special needs. Thank you, Madam President.
Next question, Senator Mark.
Question number 106 to the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Madam President, I thank my colleague Senator Mark for his keen interest in this matter of citrus greening disease. Madam President, as it relates to part 1 of the question, on April 25, 2017, the citrus greening disease was confirmed to be present in Trinidad as a result of routine sampling from 2 suspected trees, one located in Diego Martin and one located in Curep. A delimiting survey was conducted to determine the spread of the disease from the 2 focal points in Diego Martin and Curep. Samples tested positive in the following areas: Winnie Mohammed Road, Alice Glen, Aberbrook, Diamond Vale, and Pitti Valley. From the Curep focal point, samples tested positive in the following areas: Marcus Valley, St. Joseph, Riverside Road, Curep, Chamflair, Mount Hope, and Valsay North and South. Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries propagating stations of the Agricultural Services Division, namely the St. Augustine Nurseries, La Reunion Plant Propagation Station, and Marper Farm were also surveyed. The disease was found to be present in St. Augustine Nurseries, while Marper Farm and La Reunion stations were negative at that time. As it relates to part 2 of the question, Madam President, the Ministry continues to employ general management strategies for the containment of citrus greening disease, such as the treatment of infected trees with an insecticide, followed by removal and destruction of the infected trees by burning on site. This exercise is done continually to remove all infected trees. With regard to the 3rd and 4th parts of the question, Madam President, the expert advice has been that citrus greening has been present in Trinidad for at least 5 years, and there are several ways it could have crossed our borders. Nothing so far suggests that sabotage is an issue, as no such allegations of sabotage has been or are being investigated, since the presence of the disease has not been confined to the St. Augustine Nurseries alone. I thank you.
Senator Mark.
Madam President, I would like to ask my honorable colleague whether it is purely coincidental that this citrus greening has occurred particularly at the St. Augustine Nurseries, where the government is planning to construct a number of towers. Would you want to clarify for us whether this was coincidental?
Senator Mark, I won't allow that question.
Okay.
Next question, Senator Mark?
No, I'm good.
No more? Senator Hussain.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, with respect to the citrus greening disease, can the Minister indicate whether or not any steps have been taken in order to reduce the amount of citrus greening in those areas that he would have outlined in his answer?
Minister.
Madam President, as I've said before, citrus greening is a notifiable disease. It means that anybody in Trinidad and Tobago with citrus plants or trees who believe that, based on the signs that we've alerted the country to, any signs, the infected material has to be destroyed. And in relation to the ministry, we have ongoing activities. Recently, I think I answered a question relating to 2,942 mature trees since January having to be destroyed at propagating stations around the country. And that is an ongoing exercise.
Could you tell us, Honorable Minister, how many mature trees have been destroyed as a result of the citrus greening at the St. Augustine nurseries thus far?
Minister.
Madam President, I believe sometime recently I referred to a memo from Patricia Maraj, who is the Director of Agriculture Services Division, where she requested permission in relation to St. Augustine nurseries to destroy 1,648 trees. I can't say how many of those 1,648 have been destroyed to date.
Senator Mark.
Can I ask the Honorable Minister whether there has been any solution or treatment to address the spread of this citrus greening, or I'll stop it. Is there any treatment or solution to curb the spread of the citrus greening?
Minister.
Madam President, maybe I should adopt Ms. Senator Mark's approach and answer the question that was not asked. So I'll answer it in two parts. The first is that dealing with the spread involves the removal of the disease material, whether we find it. And I'm pleased to say that today we received in Trinidad the certified rootstock seed from Florida, which will be propagated in controlled conditions in Trinidad and Tobago. And that is a variety that has shown resistance in Florida. It is the first time that the United States has allowed its material out of the country. We're very happy to receive it, and it will be developed in Trinidad under the watch of the experts from Florida. Thank you.
Senator Hussain.
Thank you very much, Madam President. In light of the Minister's answer with regard to the treatment of the citrus greening disease and the destruction of trees, can the Minister indicate whether or not this disease affects the soil in which the trees were planted on?
Minister.
Madam President, I'm not in a position to answer that question.
Next question, Senator Hussain.
Question 110 to the Minister of Health, Madam President.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, in response to Roman numeral 1, the old vending facilities at the car park were frequently inspected prior to demolition. The existing old huts on the beach were also frequently inspected prior to demolition. The new temporary tents on the beach have been inspected on 4 occasions during the months of September, November, and December 2017, and on January 2018. In response to Roman numeral 2, the food handler's badge for operations, the food handler's badges for operators are up to date for all operators for the years 2017 and 2018. Approvals were granted for the use of the old vending facilities at the car park and on the beach. No approvals have been granted for the new permanent facilities to date, which I must add has not been opened as yet. The Ministry of Health is awaiting the final applications for approval for the use of these facilities for the preparation and sale of food.
Next question, Senator Obika.
Thank you, Madam President. Question 119 to the Minister of Tourism.
Minister of Tourism.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Government wishes to extend sincere condolences to the family of Mr. Samuel Thomas, who unfortunately lost his life at the Blue Basin waterfall. The Blue Basin waterfall is not under the direct control of the Ministry of Tourism. In accordance with the Waterworks and Water Conservation Act, the Drainage Division, Ministry of Works and Transport, is the competent authority for main water courses like the Blue Basin waterfall. Notwithstanding this, the Ministry of Tourism will work with the relevant authorities, including the Ministry of Works and Transport and the Diego Martin Regional Corporation, Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, to advise the public of the risks associated with swimming and other activities at the waterfall through appropriate signage and public water safety education.
Senator Beaker.
Thank you, Madam President. I know it may not be the practice to have lifeguards as is present on beaches, but there are some waterfalls such as Argyle and Tobago where there are community groups that support the work, supplement the work of a lifeguard. Is it that we're going to be doing such in Blue Basin so that there's a presence of persons who are familiar with safety?
Minister.
Yeah. Madam President, while it's a different question, the lifeguards are under the remit of the Ministry of National Security. The Ministry of Tourism will speak to the Ministry of National Security and do some sort of risk assessment to determine whether or not we can have lifeguards there.
Next question, Senator Hussain.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Question number 125 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, the government of Trinidad and Tobago recognizes the global threat posed by the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. As a consequence, measures have been heightened to deter nationals from being enticed by ISIS ideology. The government of Trinidad and Tobago has strengthened internal structures and agencies to treat with the subject of terrorism. These structures and agencies include the Strategic Services Agency, the Special Branch of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, Financial Investigation Branch of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, the Anti-Money Laundering and Countering Financing of Terrorism Compliance Unit of the Ministry of National Security, the International Affairs Unit, and the Immigration Department. Madam President, further, the Anti-Terrorism Amendment Bill 2018 seeks to amend the Anti-Terrorism Act, Chapter 1207, and will significantly strengthen Trinidad and Tobago's ability to combat terrorism. The bill contains comprehensive measures which include criminalization of travel for the purpose of committing terrorist acts and deeming persons as foreign terrorist fighters, as well as provisions to address risk posed to children, including recruiting and taking them into conflict zones. Also, the Strategic Services Agency Amendment Bill 2016, which was proclaimed on the 4th of October 2017, amended the Strategic Services Agency Act, Chapter 1506, to expand the remit of the SSA to include broader law enforcement, coordination, and intelligence functions. In an effort, Madam President, to bolster national capacity in the area of countering and preventing violent extremism, Trinidad and Tobago has also enhanced collaboration with its regional and international partners, including the United States of America, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and Canada, on a number of crime reduction and social justice programs. Trinidad and Tobago also continues to work closely with the United Nations on these matters. These initiatives involve increased intelligence sharing between law enforcement and intelligence agencies, the provision of enhanced operational support, and participation in counterterrorism programs. The government has also partnered with key international agencies such as Hidayah, an international center of excellence for countering violent extremism, to deliver required training to national stakeholders in an effort to build national capacity on the issue of both preventing and countering radicalization in Trinidad and Tobago. In this regard, key training has been provided for the purpose of development of a national action plan. A similar partnership also exists with the Commonwealth Countering Violent Extremism Unit. To this end, the government has enhanced its security and intelligence collaboration with traditional and non-traditional partners at the national, regional, and international level. The government has also begun a process of deepening partnership with key non-governmental, faith-based, and community-based organizations. To this end, one would recall that at the level of the national security and at the level of the Prime Minister, discussions were held, referred to as the round table discussions, with members of the Muslim faith in Trinidad and Tobago. It was an effort to speak with one voice against radicalization and to prevent youths or young people from being attracted to the ISIS philosophy. Madam President.
Senator Hussain.
Madam President, the answer given by the Minister of National Security with regards to engaging national stakeholders and training of these stakeholders, can the Minister indicate whether or not any programs have so far been implemented in communities in order to prevent persons from extremism?
Minister of National Security.
Madam President, the discussion has taken place at the level of the leaders of religious organizations in Trinidad and Tobago. However, I can say that there are some programs that have been done at the level of communities through the citizen security programs thus far. But again, it's an expanding program, it's a work in progress.
Senator Hussain.
Madam President, having regards to all of the measures and stakeholders that the Minister had indicated have been engaged with respect to this issue, can the Minister indicate whether or not there has been a decline in the amount of persons who would be traveling abroad to Syria?
Minister.
Madam President, I cannot say whether there is a decline.
Senator Hussain.
Madam President, can the Minister indicate whether or not there are any, whether or not the Ministry took any step in order to track persons going from Trinidad and Tobago to Syria?
If that question doesn't arise, next question.
No.
Senator Amin.
Madam President, I just want to ask the Minister, what are his indicators or the Ministry's indicators that you are looking for to assess whether what you plan to implement is reaping results?
Minister.
Madam President, the program which speaks to itself in terms of the assessment and so on. There will be some monitoring taking place by the Ministry of National Security and the agencies so charged.
Next question, Senator Obika.
Thank you, Madam President. Question number 126 to the Minister of Works and Transport.
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, there was no malfunction of any of the engines on the Trini Flash on March 27, 2018. Prior to the use of the Trini Flash, maintenance was conducted on 2 of its 4 engines were replaced. This was followed by successful sea trials. The engines were also monitored during the voyage to and from Tobago, and all engines, original and replaced, were noted to be operated satisfactorily. The exhaust system over both replaced engines had to be redone. These works consisted of the supplying, fabrication, and installation of new exhaust pipe and silencers. Those elements were then insulated with lagging material capable of withstanding very high temperature. In this case, the rated thermal capacity of the lagging was 100 degrees Celsius. Following the fire incident, investigation revealed flaws in the workmanship of the installation. In particular, the butt joints of the installation were not properly sealed, and in one particular area there was a gap. Hot air from around the silencers, which were trapped by the insulation, escaped through the opening in the seals and heated and burned the nearby overhead electrical and communication cable and the cable trays, thereby causing the fire. The fire damage was confirmed to be the cable immediately above the opening of the lagging. A section of the cable tray in that area, the surface area of the insulation against the ceiling was also insulated on the vessel. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Obika.
Thank you, Madam President. Then could the Minister indicate if then in effect that the vessel in the state it was in was incapable of making the inter-island route?
Minister.
Madam President, the vessel made the inter-island route. As I said, there was a flaw in the repairs of the silencer and on the engine. It had nothing to do with the engine or the safety of the vessel. It was a fault of the supplier who supplied the silencer on the engine did not do proper workmanship.
Senator Hussain.
Madam President, is the minister saying that on the 27th of March, the water taxi made the journey, having regard to that water taxi being marooned in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the night, and those passengers haven't been transferred on another vessel?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I said, the vessel arrived in Tobago. It's on its return from Tobago the incident occurred, and the passengers were transported onto the Cabo Star, taken back to Tobago, and the vessel then made its journey to Trinidad.
Next question, Senator Obika.
Thank you, Madam President. Question number 127 to the Minister of Public Utilities.
Minister of Public Utilities.
Madam President, the Ministry of Health has advised that contrary to what was indicated by Senator Taraka Obika in his question, the Carcass Health Center was open and operational with a full complement of staff on Tuesday, the 27th of March, 2018. The Ministry of Health further advised that healthcare delivery at the health center was not compromised on that day by any disruption in water supply, emergencies, or adverse situations. Moreover, the facility is equipped with two 1,000-gallon water storage tanks, which are used as backup when there is a temporary disruption in the supply of pipe-borne water. The provision of a safe and reliable supply of water to health facilities throughout the country is a priority of the Water and Sewerage Authority. In this regard, arrangements are in place to ensure that all health facilities are provided with an adequate supply of truck-borne water when there is a disruption in the supply of pipe-borne water. Emergency contact numbers and supply arrangements have been established to allow for timely notification of disruptions in the supply of pipe-borne water and the facility's speedy response to the provision of pipe-borne water.
Senator Obika.
Thank you, Madam President. I find it very confusing that the minister would say that I'm not correct, because is he saying that Radhika Sukraj article on March 28, the following day, of the Trinidad Guardian, where she stated the Carcass Health Center was also shut down given this water shortage, is he saying that this article is false from the Guardian?
Minister, you don't have to respond to that. That does not arise. And Senator Obika, may I just point out to you that, I want to just point out to you Standing Order 28-1C. Next question, Senator Obika.
Actually, I wanted to ask a supplemental, another supplemental.
Well, could you just pose that to me in the proper manner, please?
Okay, the question basically is,
yes,
the article said the health center closed
and I have already said,
water.
Senator Obika, that I'm not allowing that question. Do you have another supplement?
Sorry, the question number 128 to the Minister of Education.
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Roman 1, the question: has the ministry launched an investigation into this incident? Answer, Madam President, the matter was immediately investigated by the school supervisors of the St. Patrick Education District, under whose jurisdiction Point 14 RC falls. Roman 2, if the answer to 1 is in the affirmative, has the investigation been completed? The answer, yes, the investigation has been completed, and the report was submitted by the school supervisors of the St. Patrick Education District. Roman 3, what were the findings of such investigation? Answer, Madam President, the findings of the investigation revealed that the incident occurred outside the school compound after school was dismissed, while students were awaiting transport to be taken home. 2 pupils were swinging on a road sign, which fell on one of the pupils, who sustained an injury to the head, and not as a result of bullying as reported in the media? And the fourth question, Woman 4, what action will be taken to ensure that there is no recurrence of this situation? The school administration has reviewed the procedures with respect to students' behavior and the supervision of students. Students, including those who were involved in the incident, have been reminded of the guidelines governing their conduct in and out of school to ensure their personal safety. Further, the school's administration contacted the Point Fortin Borough Council and the sign was removed. Thank you very much.
Senator Obika.
Thank you, Madam President. Not to run afoul of Standing Order 28(1)C, I would like to ask the Minister if any counseling was given for the parent of the child in question that was the victim of bullying.
Before I call on the Minister to respond, I would ask all members to be very careful when I make a ruling and your subsequent pronouncements on it. Minister.
Madam President, I don't understand that question. I made it very clear that it was not a matter of bullying. I don't know what is occupying the mind of Senator Obika to insist that it's bullying. It was an accident that happened. I don't know whether he was listening to me. You need to listen first before you open your mouth.
Minister. Senator Obika, next.
Thank you, Madam President. Having listened to the Honorable Minister of Education and an esteemed educator, I would like to ask, given the mishap, the freak accident that happened, given the child, is there any counseling for the parent of the child in question?
I believe you just asked that question.
No, actually, I corrected it by removing the word bullying. So the freak accident that happened and the incident, was there any counseling for the parent in question?
I think it's the same. You can ask another supplementer. Go ahead. I won't allow that one.
Okay. Madam President, there's another. I will leave it like that. Okay.
Next question, Senator Richards.
Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Amin, please.
Thank you, Madam President. Good afternoon, colleagues. Question number 141 to the Minister of Works and Transport.
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, at this time, the toilet facilities on the Cabo Star are functional. The toilet systems have been working very well for the majority of the contracted period, with the exception of a few instances when items were intentionally flushed into the system. The Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago has advised that in order to prevent similar situations in the future, the owner of the vessel are in the process of installing a protective system in all the passenger toilets. This specific trap hook are designed to avoid blockage of the sewage line in the case of a jam in some of the units. I thank you.
Senator Richards.
President, can the Minister indicate the timeline for the remedial interventive activities on the Cabo Star?
Thank you. Madam Speaker, as I indicate, the toilet facilities are working on at the time when this had happened, they would have shut down the facilities while the vessel were on journey, and once it came back on shore, they would have done the remedial work. Since then, we have not had any reports of this incident reoccurring.
President, having regard to question number 111, I would like to invoke Standing Order 2716, please.
Standing Order 2715 will be invoked.
I apologize.
Public business, government business, bills, second reading.
Honourable Senators, the debate on the second reading of the following bill, namely a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Property Tax Act, Chapter 7604, which was in progress when the Senate adjourned on Tuesday, May the 1st, 2018, will be resumed. Honourable Senators, on the last occasion that the Senate met, the Minister in the Ministry of Finance had begun her winding up. Honourable Minister, you have 39 minutes of speaking time remaining. Minister.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, there were several issues raised, a lot of them a common theme among the senators, so I will deal with the issues by issue rather than by senator. The first one that a lot of heavy weather was made about was the government's plan to impose tax on squatters. Senator Richards commented on whether it was appropriate to do so. Were we legitimizing squatters by doing that? Senator Obika indicated that he thought it was immoral for the government to seek to tax squatters. I find it strange that Senator Obika is not concerned or doesn't see anything immoral about somebody illegally occupying land owned by somebody else, but finds it immoral that we will seek to impose tax on these people. So let me deal with the issue of legitimizing the squatters. Madam President, it is generally accepted in law, in tax law, and has been a principle for quite some time.
Madam President, Standing Order 42-9, I wish to correct the content of the speech of the Minister.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, on the issue of whether it is legitimizing an illegal activity to impose tax on that activity, there are several cases that address this issue. For example, the case of Canadian Ministry of Finance and Smith, which involved the illegal importation and sale of alcohol into Canada, where the individual who was assessed a tax on the profits of that activity claimed that it was improper for the Revenue Authority to tax him on that income because the activity was illegal. The judges ruled against him, and Lord Haldon said that once the character of a business has been ascertained as being in the nature of a trade, the person who carried it out cannot found upon the elements of illegality to evade tax. And Madam President, that's just one of several cases where judges throughout the world have recognized that notwithstanding that an activity is illegal, it is quite proper to tax that activity. The most famous case in the world, I think, that gives that evidences that position is Al Capone, because you will recall that Al Capone was not imprisoned because of his widely acknowledged involvement in illegal activity. He was jailed finally because of tax evasion, which is an acknowledgement by the system that it was proper for him to pay tax on the gains of his illegal activity. Sure.
In those cases you cited, I'm presuming that the illegal activity halted and did not continue, or is that not the case? Am I misunderstanding those? So that in that case, the state would have sanctioned taxes on the illegality, but ceased the illegality in terms of its continuance. In these cases, I'm presuming those persons will continue to occupy those lands illegally, and that's my concern.
Well, thank you. So that what I'm trying to say is that one issue is separate from the other. The fact that you're carrying on illegal activity does not mean that you ought not to pay a tax. You are still carrying on an illegal activity, and so the state has the authority to, and in my view, should address the illegality, but that doesn't mean that the person who is illegally occupying land and who is enjoying the benefits of the roads and water provided by WASA and garbage collection and all these other things should not pay tax in respect of that property, whereas the person next to him who scrimped and saved and borrowed and sacrificed to pay properly for his property should be paying tax. That, in my view, is immoral. So we need to separate the immorality from the fact that there is a basis for going after that person for the illegal activity. So tax him, yes, and prosecute him as well, in my view. And lest it be said that the Minister of Finance is advocating taxing poor squatters who cannot afford to bear taxes, let me remind you that there is a provision in the legislation providing for relief for people who are financially strapped and unable to bear the cost of tax. Whether that person is a squatter or not, the person can qualify can qualify for that exemption if they are in the situation envisaged by the Act. And for those people, they can make an application to the board will consider it. If the board is satisfied that they cannot afford the taxes can be waived. But there are squatters in Trinidad and Tobago who are not financially strapped. They are well off. I am personally aware of an individual who is properly educated, in an excellent job, probably earning higher salaries than all of us. And not only is he living on land, not only is he squatting on land that does not belong to him, but he and his family have set up a gated community on this property. Are you saying to me that he should not bear the cost of the tax when he's demanding proper roads, he's demanding water, he's demanding all the services of the state? I do not agree with that. So we have to separate the issue of squatting, because we tend to associate squatting with financial difficulties. That is not necessarily the case, right? So, yes, the government is insisting that people who are squatting illegally should bear the tax, and that is separate and apart from whether or not action should be taken against them in respect of the squatting, or alternatively, that their position on the land should be regularized. They're two separate issues. Okay, so a few senators also raised the issue of exemptions being provided. Senator Choate, in particular, listed several NGOs and was concerned about the fact that we were not providing relief to NGOs. Senator Amin indicated that the relief provided could allow persons to register organizations simply to avoid the tax. So let me amend both misconceptions. What I had indicated was that not all NGOs would qualify for the relief. To qualify for the relief, the organization would have to be an approved charitable organization. So an NGO that is carrying on activity that qualifies as charitable activity would go through the process to get approval and can qualify for the relief. And Senator Choate, I'm happy to advise you that all of the organizations that you have listed in your presentation that I was able to take a note of are in fact approved charitable institutions and will qualify for the relief. They included the Rape Crisis Center, ALTA, Rebirth. These are all on the list of approved charitable organizations. And Senator Amin, the reason why we have moved away from saying all charitable institutions will qualify for the relief to say charitable institutions approved under Section 61G of the Income Tax Act was to ensure that somebody could not arbitrarily just register an entity that they call charitable and get entitlement to relief. There is a process that they have to go through to satisfy the Board of Inland Revenue that they are in fact charitable, not only in terms of what their bylaws state, but in how they operate and how they spend their money. So there is a process in place to monitor it. And this is the very reason why we introduced the amendment, to make that provision tighter. Senator Creese, who is not here today, raised the issue of why aren't we providing relief to credit unions, and isn't that double taxing workers? And I'm sure Senator Creese is well aware of the fact that many credit unions can quite easily afford to pay the tax. There are many credit unions who own and rent significant commercial properties to the government as well as the private sector, earning hundreds of thousands of dollars per month. And the reason why Senator Creese would be aware of this is because he leads such a credit union. So to give a broad brush position and say credit union should not be called upon to pay property tax, I cannot accept that recommendation. Senator Small asked why the University of Southern California was not on the list of exempt entities, Caribbean, sorry. And this is because the intention was to provide relief to government-owned and government-supported institutions, and that university does not fall within that category. There are quite a few senators, among them Senator Choate, Senator Richards, and Senator Amin, who asked why the government was not being required to pay interest on refunds when those refunds were paid late. Because we were asking the taxpayer to pay interest, but the government was not required to pay. And I will refer you to Section 20 of the Act, which at subsection 1A2 states any amount of a refund under Section 1A that remains outstanding for more than 6 months after the date by which it became due shall bear interest at the rate of 6% per annum from the day after the expiration of that period until the amount outstanding is satisfied. So the government is obliged under the Act as originally drafted, which is why if you only looked at the amendments, you wouldn't have seen it. Under the Act as originally drafted, the government is obliged to pay interest on refunds if the refunds are not paid within 6 months. There was a question as to why we were not seeking to replace the Tax Appeal Board with the Appeal Tribunal that was set up under the Valuation Bill, the Valuation Act as amended recently. And it is not an oversight. It is not because the Valuation Tribunal had not yet been established by at the time that we drafted it. It was a deliberate decision to separate the valuation issue from the tax issue. We have a tax tribunal that deals with all tax matters in Trinidad and Tobago, and we do not want to disturb that. The Valuation Tribunal will deal with a specialist area of activity, which is evaluation of property. It is not to be regarded as a second tax court. And this is why the appeals under the Property Tax Act, which will deal only with the tax on property rather than valuations to property, will continue to go before the Tax Appeal Board. I think my colleague, Senator, the Leader of Government Business, adequately dealt with the issue of the allocation of the tax to local government for the purpose of developing and allowing more autonomy in local government. We do plan to bring that legislation before the House in the not-too-distant future, and it will address the issue of allocation of property tax to the regional corporations. The issue of hardship was mentioned by several people. The most common group of people who were seen to potentially be at risk of suffering from hardship were pensioners. And Senator Hussain, for example, advocated that we should adopt Barbados' position of allowing, he said 60%, my research indicates 50% relief from the tax on property to pensioners. Again, Senator Hussain's maths has me a little confused because in my computation, 100% relief trumps 50 or 60% relief. The only difficulty there is that we are asking the person who is seeking such relief to come before the board every 2 years to satisfy the board that he continues to qualify for relief on the basis of hardship. If I were a pensioner suffering from hardship and you gave me a choice between paying 50 to 60% of the tax or paying none on condition that I'm prepared to go to the board every 2 years to satisfy them that my condition remains the same, I would choose option 2. I would prefer to pay nothing because I'm suffering from hardship. So I continue to believe that our formula is superior to the one proposed, the one recommended out of the Barbados legislation. And so this is the one we're proposing to move forward with. To allay the concerns of the citizenry about the process and where they will have to go, it is the intention of the government, as it introduces and rolls out the TTRA in the not-too-distant future, to beef up the regional offices and the district offices to provide a fuller service, and so that you will not be required to go to Port of Spain or to go to Tobago, those two offices only, to put in this application, have the applications dealt with. You will be able to do it within your region, and so that will reduce the level of stress and discomfort you will have to go through. And again, it's only once every 2 years to ensure that you maintain this benefit if you continue to qualify for it. Senator Hossain, again, focused on the fact that we were saying that a pensioner would be required, well, the government was saying that $500 was a little bit of money, and therefore it would be difficult for people to pay $500 every month for property tax. Now, there is some confusion with this $500. I never said that anybody would be required to pay $500 tax. The $500 issue came up under the valuation of tax amendment, and it had to do with adjusting the penalty for committing an offense under that legislation. It is not a tax payment. Now, to be liable for a $500 monthly tax bill, you would have to be earning annual rental income of $200,000 or monthly income, rental income of $16,000. And it seems to me that if you are in that position, I don't see anything wrong with you being asked to pay $500 a month or $6,000 a year in tax. But the majority of people who are earning who are living in standard accommodation that is estimated to cost between $3,000 and $4,000 will pay nowhere in the vicinity of $500 a month. It would be below $100 a month. So let us not get confused with figures and again traumatize people who are concerned about what's happening with this tax. Senator Richards asked us to consider, in looking at the issue of giving relief to people who are suffering hardship, people who are parents of children with special needs. Senator Choate spoke about giving relief to people with Alzheimer's, divorced women, and so on. And again, I would say that the relief is intended to apply to people who cannot afford to pay the tax, for whatever reason. If you cannot afford to pay the tax because you're recently divorced and you have no more income and you're not receiving your maintenance payments from your spouse, your former spouse, then that is a basis on which you can apply for relief. If you are the parent of a special needs person and the cost of medical and educational and other support is putting you in a position where you cannot afford to pay the tax, again, that is a basis for relief. So the basis for the relief is broad enough, in my view, to encompass all of these groups. And the cases will be considered, and once the individuals can provide the support, they will be granted the relief.
Respect that point on the relief. For example, for a 5-year period, I am unable to pay the property tax, and I get the relief from the board, and subsequently I acquire wealth. Would that period I did not pay any property tax for, will that now accrue to be paid at that end of the 5-year, and will it be, if the answer is yes, will there be an interest attached to it?
The relief is a deferral. The board is only authorized to defer taxes. So anytime the board gives you relief, it's a deferral. There is a provision under the legislation, however, for the president in certain circumstances to waive the tax in part or in full, and that would be at the discretion of the president. In respect of the interest, there is no contemplation that interest will be charged where there's a deferral unless the period of deferral comes to an end and you do not pay within a reasonable time. Yes? Okay. Senator Ramdeen was concerned that we would be charging somebody living in Icacos the same amount of tax as we charge somebody in Westmoreland. And he was saying that to support his view that we should revert to the land and building taxes where different rates applied in different parts of the country. Now, my response to that would be the value of land in Westmoreland would naturally be higher than the value of land in Icacos. So for somebody's property in Icacos to be rated the same as the property in Westmoreland, that would have to be some special kind of house, and a very expensive special kind of house. And if the person in Icacos can afford to build a house like that, why should he not pay the same as the person in Westmoreland if the value of the property, land, and building included is the same as the property in Icacos? So I don't see the basis for distinguishing rates on the basis of where the property is. It has to be on the basis of the value of the property. We took I think it was Senator Hussain who brought to our attention, there was an omission in Schedule 4 regarding the Shogunas, and we took that into account and we will address that. Senator Raful asked why property tax and not TTRA. Again, Senator Raful, is not an either-or. We are committed to coming forward with the TTRA to improve the collection of tax, but we believe, for all the reasons stated, that property tax is a tax that we should impose. We're looking at the whole picture, and we think that is something that we need to move forward with. So that in wrapping up, I will remind you of the broad reasons why we moved from a land building tax to a property tax. We had land subject to tax at $10 an acre, and land with buildings subject to tax on the basis of the annual rateable value. Now, as somebody who used to advise taxpayers on how to avoid, not evade tax, you could take advantage of that provision. Let's say I wanted a block to put my house because I don't want any neighbors close. I would say to the person who is selling the land, okay, sell me 10,000 square feet so I can build my mansion, and sell my wife the rest. So that on the block that I build, I pay the tax and the annual rateable value. And on the rest of the acre, which I also enjoy as part of my property, I pay $10. And yeah, that's what would happen. And so it was reasonable to move away. Yeah, my mind works that way. It's reasonable to move away from that approach to charging on the basis of the value of the property, whether the property is enhanced with a building or not. The value that would arise would differ depending on whether it's enhanced with a property or not. So, in my view, the property tax is a superior tax to the land and building tax. It reduces the likelihood of abuse, and it encourages people to use land properly as opposed to leaving it vacant. I will remind you that under the Land and Building Taxes Act, we had a range of rates in different boroughs and corporations, ranging from 2% in Point Fortin to 10% in Port of Spain. Why should somebody living in Port of Spain pay 10% property tax while somebody in Point Fortin is paying 2%? It makes no sense. So what we have done is we have uniformed the rates by category. So we have 4 different categories, and each category will be paying at the same rate throughout the country. So, what is this tax seeking to do? It's seeking to unify the responsibility for and timing of the assessment of properties under one entity, which is the Valuation Commission, rather than having different authorities in different regions doing assessments on different bases. It is seeking to unify the timing so that we move away from a situation where The houses in Port of Spain were assessed in 1948, and the houses in Point Fortin were assessed in 2009, and therefore people in Point Fortin are paying more. We are seeking to unify the rates across the country, as I said. We are seeking to stagger the rates to encourage the use of property in areas that we're trying to promote and to provide relief to residential people. So agriculture, you pay only 1% because agriculture is an area that we're trying to promote and the return tends to be lower than in other areas. Residential, 3%, commercial, 5%, and industrial, 3% and 6%. So that what this bill seeks to do is to clarify certain issues that were not properly addressed in the original legislation. As I had outlined, the property tax is a reasonable tax, it's equitable. We will provide the relief to the people who cannot afford it. We do not expect the valuations to throw up unreasonable amounts of tax liabilities, but we will see that as we start the valuation exercise. As I said before, the tax is reasonable, the tax is necessary, the tax will be used largely in respect of the local government reform, which is coming soon, and for that reason, we recommend the amendments to you, and hope that you can provide the support to us. Madam President, I thank you and I beg to move.
Senator Obika.
Thank you, Madam President. The Honourable Minister stated that, in reference to myself, that I did not find it immoral for persons to occupy lands illegally. However, in my presentation, I did not comment specifically on the morality of squatting, but rather the morality of taxing squatters. So the Minister is wrong, and I deserve an apology from the Minister in this regard. My contribution was as follows.
No, Senator Obika, if you read carefully what the standing order is about, it's about, so you're not qualifying with what you're saying, okay? So I will now put the matter to the vote. Honourable Senators, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Property Tax Act, Chapter 7604, be now read a second time. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Property Tax Act, Chapter 7604.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Madam President, in accordance with Standing Order 66.1, I beg to move that an act to amend the Property Tax Act, Chapter 7604, be committed to a committee of the whole Senate forthwith to be considered clause by clause.
Honourable Senators, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Property Tax Act, Chapter 7604, be committed to a committee of the whole Senate forthwith to be considered clause by clause. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The Senate shall now go into committee of the whole to consider the bill clause by clause. Honourable Senators, there are 3 sets of amendments that have been circulated. Amendments have been circulated on behalf of the Minister of Finance, Senator Mahabir and Senator Mark. Is everyone in possession of the amendments? Can I see by a show of hands if anyone needs to receive some amendments. All right. Honourable Senators, the amendment circulated on behalf of the Ministry of Finance, that was the last set of amendments. I'm therefore going to suspend the committee for 10 minutes so that all members can familiarise themselves with the different sets of amendments. So the committee is suspended for 10 minutes.
This is the Parliament Channel and Parliament Radio 105.5 FM.
When construction was completed on the Eric Williams Financial Complex in 1986, it was one of the tallest buildings in the English-speaking Caribbean. At the time, it was an outstanding example of modern architecture and also a very physical manifestation of Trinidad and Tobago's economic growth and development. The oil boom was in full swing when architects Anthony C. Lewis and Associates were commissioned to design a monumental financial complex in 1979.
The Eric Williams Financial Complex, I think, is a sort of monumental modern work. I think it represents in many ways the sort of a prominent symbol of independence. You know, it's closely associated with the political and social and economic idealism, I think, that characterized that time.
To be chosen to do this project was of course, a great honor for us, a privilege, in fact, for us to be designing such an important building, both in the country and in the Caribbean. It was the largest project that was going to be built in the Caribbean by local consultants. So it meant actually opening a second office. We had to build a vault to keep the drawings in, because you could imagine if, dare I say, a fire or something occurred in the middle of all of this, all of that work would have been lost.
New ground was broken in the design and construction of Trinidad and Tobago's first skyscraper. However, the project presented many challenges to the architects. The building's dual functions as the central bank and the Ministry of Finance were key factors influencing their design. As two completely independent entities, however, part of the brief was that there be a clear division between the two buildings, with separate electrical and water systems. As the project progressed, the original design had to be adapted and altered.
The design of the buildings, the Twin Towers, wasn't always Twin Towers. It actually started off as the central bank being a 22-story building, and the Ministry of Finance, which was on Independence Square, of a lower building of about 7 or 8 stories. When the governor presented the designs, the original designs in that form, to the Prime Minister of the day, which was Eric Williams, he insisted that no
no other building should be taller than the government Ministry of Finance building, and that led us to change the design to twin towers. So that's the story of how they became twin towers.
Another major factor impacting on construction was that the 22-story buildings, which were being built on sandy reclaimed land, had to be earthquake resistant. A strong foundation was critical, and it required a very deep basement to allow the pilings to reach bedrock. Stability in case of an earthquake also came from another aspect of the design.
The other effect of earthquakes design was really to design a building that was very stiff in each direction, and those X crosses that you see, the X braces we call them, that go up the buildings in both directions, and it was north, south, and east, west. Those keep the building very stiff in both directions, so that in the case of an earthquake, those braces then come into play. They don't actually serve much of a function normally, but it helps to keep the building from twisting in an earthquake.
In designing the Twin Towers, architects also considered the impact such a monumental building would have on the national psyche. The lower podium blocks at the base of the building were designed to allow people to walk around the structure without feeling intimidated. These lower blocks also relate to the smaller buildings that are adjacent.
Another very important aspect of the design was to do with the public space that was formed between these buildings. And to explain that, I mean, it wasn't long after Trinidad became a republic. A republic suggests that everything is open, you know, that the public was then allowed to come into the square to experience the buildings. It wasn't surrounded by a wall or fence as it is today.
The brief for the central bank included an auditorium and concert hall, which was also a civic contribution aimed at enhancing the performing arts in Trinidad and Tobago.
To me, as an architect, having looked at things over time, the auditorium is an interesting space. It's stylistically something that is very much from the 70s. You know, the design driven by geometry and using kind of fairly unconventional forms to use the space or to fashion the space as function for an auditorium. And I've spoken there a couple of times and attended events there, and I think it works very, very well.
The building of the Eric Williams Financial Complex was not without controversy. Constructing a glass building facing the west in the tropics proposed a serious challenge. And differences of opinion regarding materials led to the eventual termination of ACLA as lead architects on the project. They were replaced by the practice Newer Lewis Broadbridge, which completed the project. Opened in 1986, the Eric Williams Financial Complex still stands as one of the finest facilities of its type in the country. The Money Museum was opened to the public in December 2004. Its exhibits tell the story of the history of money from its earliest origins to the function of the central bank today.
I think buildings like this, and particularly this building, had an enormous impact on society. You know, you see it represented on banknotes. I think it represented in many ways an important symbol of modernity and the advancement of society. And I think that people identify in many ways, maybe subconsciously, with those images. They represent in many ways ideas of development, of moving forward, of society advancing.
The Eric Williams Financial Complex is a key part of Port of Spain's modern architectural landscape. The architects understood the significance and impact such a building would have on society, and this is reflected in its design. Today, the Twin Towers are integral to our...
The Parliament Chamber.
Honourable the President.
Clauses 1 and 2.
Honourable Senators, the question is that clauses 1 and 2 stand part of the bill. The question is that clauses 1 and 2 now stand part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Clauses 1 and 2 now stand part of the bill.
Clause 3.
The question is that clause 3 stand part of the bill.
Madam Chairman, there is an amendment circulated to clause 3, correcting a grammatical error. If one looks at the Parent Act, it would now read as follows. Appeal means an appeal to the Tax Appeal Board from a decision of the board upon an objection by the owner of land to an assessment of tax. The word "an" was missing, so it was grammatically incorrect. So you're simply putting in the word "an."
Sure. But there is an amendment circulated as well on behalf of Senator Mark.
Okay.
So, Senator Mark, could we deal with your amendment, please?
Yes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We are proposing for the Minister's consideration. First of all, when you look at the definition of owner in the Parent Act, you will see, Madam Chair, that the owner definition includes the owner or occupier of any land, and it goes on to explain what land, well, that means, that is owner. Now, we have a challenge here, Madam Chair. Somebody takes out a mortgage with a bank, signs a deed, it becomes law, it is registered. We pass this law. Property tax is now administered at the rate of 3% on residents. The question here is, from a legal perspective, I am not the owner of that property. I am just paying the bank mortgage payments and in that property temporarily until I'm able to complete my payment. If I fail to meet my obligations in a 25-year mortgage, the bank would seize my property. So I am asking the question here, and I'm suggesting to the Honourable Minister that the owner, as defined in the Parent Act, right, should not include occupier. Let the owner be the owner, but the owner cannot mean the occupier, Madam President. Because as I said, if I have a mortgage with a bank, Madam President, I've made my position clear. I don't have to repeat myself. So I am asking the Minister to give consideration to that. Thank you.
Madam Chairman.
No, before.
Oh, sorry.
Senator Hussain.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I just wanted to endorse the point that Senator Mark has made, because as we know, I know the Minister said he got the point, but just to reinforce that the legal interest in the property lies with the bank, and the equitable interest would lie with the person who will be subject to the mortgage. Now, I also believe that we should remove the definition, within the definition, occupier, because of our policy decision in terms of this would allow you all to tax squatters, persons who have no legal interest in land. So I believe that this occupier should be removed, and it will also cause other issues. For example, where someone, for example, a tenant and a landlord, the landlord and tenant relationship, the tenant is the occupier, whereas the landlord is the legal owner. If a tenant, I'm speaking about, let's look at statutory leases, the 30-year leases, whether or not the landlord or whether or not the tenant will be liable to pay the tax, because most of the time it's the tenants who actually are the ones who pay the taxes for the house that is on the property. And that is my submission on this.
Minister.
If we were to accept the argument, then all persons who have taken out a mortgage loan for property would be excluded. That doesn't make any sense. The owner is the person who has title to the property. Just because you have a mortgage loan, that doesn't mean anything. It is only if the financier moves to take ownership of the property because you have defaulted on your loan payments and the process is completed, whatever process it is, whether they have to go to court and get an order of the court. It is only then that the ownership changes. But the owner is the owner from the time that you have received title to the property. So I'm afraid I can't accept your argument.
Yeah, but Madam Chair, my colleague raised a point about the landlord-tenant relationship.
No, well, let's deal with it one by one. So I'm just dealing with the person who has the title to the property. The name is on the deed. The name has not been removed from the deed. There's no court action to remove them as the person with legal title to the property. I can't accept that it would make any sense to say because you have taken out a loan on the property and because there's a mortgage on the property that you should no longer be deemed to be the owner. I can't accept that. With respect to the tenant, the arrangement is that the tenant then deducts the tax from the rent. And the tenant deducts the tax from the rental payment to the landlord. It's just to facilitate tenants. The landlord may not, the owner, who is the landlord, may not be paying the tax. And you don't want a situation where there's a move to take possession of property. The tenant is there paying their rent, on time and so on, but the owner is not paying their property tax. You're allowing the tenant now to pay the property tax and deduct it from the rent. So that's the reason for that. With respect to squatters, I would like to know what we're supposed to do. Because if we look at one of the amendments here, which I'm not saying we're necessarily going to accept it, but one of the amendments proposed by someone else to another clause is that the revenue from property tax should be used to finance the operations of local government. So that's to provide services, collection of garbage, maintenance of local roads, maintenance of local water courses, maintenance of recreation grounds. And squatting communities, I can tell you from my own constituency, I have squatting communities in River Estate, in Blue Basin, in Waterwheel, in Bagatelle, and there's substantial infrastructure that has been placed in there by the government using taxpayers' money. We maintain the roads, we collect garbage, we provide them with services. Who is supposed to bear that responsibility for providing these services to upgrade these communities? So, whereas the squatter does not have title, certainly in that particular case, the communities I have mentioned there, many of those people have certificates of comfort. They're not going to move from there. They will eventually get statutory leases. They'll eventually get long-term leases to the property. They'll eventually get title. Why should we exclude someone who is squatting on property and does not have title but is enjoying local government services at the location? If I could get an understanding of the thinking, then perhaps we could develop this point.
Before, Senator Roach, you wanted to say something?
Listening to what Senator Mark has said before, but listening to the analysis given by the Honorable Minister does in fact make sense, because when you have a mortgage, you have basically two interests. You have the legal interest, you have the equitable interest, and what you are giving up when you have the mortgage is the legal interest, but you maintain the equitable interest with a right to redeem once the mortgage is liquidated. So it makes sense what he's saying here now.
Senator Hussain.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Minister, with respect to the point on the mortgage again, I noticed that on TTMF website, it indicated that the HDC tenants, or not the tenants, the HDC persons who would have been allocated houses, that the mortgage payment, that the property tax will be included in the mortgage payment. I got this from the TTMF website. I can pass a copy to you if you'd like.
But
yes.
What TTMF does, if you just allow me to interrupt, I apologize for interrupting. They facilitate borrowers with all sorts of things. They lend them money to buy appliances, and they lend them money for insurance for the property. So this is part of a package, and to assist purchasers of property to get cash flow at the beginning to deal with these issues, and then they pay for it over the period of the loan. So.
And what TTMF does as well is that they take on the responsibility for the payment, not the cost, but the responsibility to reduce the likelihood of the property being seized for non-payment of water rates and property tax and so on.
TTMF would be the body paying the taxes.
No, that's an option, you know. The person does not have to agree to that, you know. When you go to TTMF, you're simply borrowing money to buy property. You don't have to agree with them that they will take on the responsibility for property tax, because you might find yourself in trouble on the flip side where they don't pay it. So you are there paying your mortgage loan and TTMF not paying your tax. Next thing, somebody comes and sees your property. So it's an option, it's not mandatory.
Okay, and the other point with respect to the tenant, Minister, you gave an explanation that it would be reduced from the rent. Is that found in the body of the Act?
It is.
It is?
Yeah, yes.
Can you just point me to the section, please?
I'll find it for you.
Sure, thank you, Minister.
All right. So members, Senator Beaker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the Honourable Minister. And forgive me if it's already in the Act and you can explain. I understand the role of TTMF, which is a risk mitigating factor to protect the integrity of the asset of the loan to pay the tax. But for the instance where a title holder may have a tenant, is it that we're going to ask the title holder permission to allow the tenant to pay this tax, or the title holder will be involved in this transaction in the event that persons don't settle on lands without the knowledge of the title holders and decide to pay taxes so that they can do some adverse possession, if that is the correct legal term?
The section is section 31, and this is an original section. It's in the existing Act, so this would have been passed since 2009, and it says, notwithstanding subsection 1, which is simply the payment of tax, the amount to be collected from the owner of land may be collected from the tenant or occupier of the land or any part thereof, and the tenant or occupier may deduct the amount paid from the rent payable by him in respect of the land. So I would think this is really something that has to be resolved between the owner and the tenant.
My question, just permit me, because my training is in more finance and business, but does it state that, does it provide protection for the owners of the land so that they would be aware that a tenant is going to be paying this property tax? That is basically the question that I have.
It would have to be an arrangement worked out between the owner and the tenant.
Minister, in the event that there's no arrangement, and
the owner is liable.
But let's just say the both parties pay the taxes, there's a system in place so that the authority does not collect tax from both the tenant and the landlord.
I would hope that would not happen. You can only collect from one.
But if there's a system,
I would hope that will not happen.
The assessment rule will identify the quantum of tax payable every year on the property, so the board will not accept any more than that.
Sure.
So, Senator Mark, we dealt with one aspect of the amendment circulated by you. Let's move on to the 3B4.
Yeah. Madam Chair, again, we looked at these definitions, and which is capital value, commercial land, industrial land, and residential land. And we couldn't locate, except if it was an oversight on my part, but these things are more applicable to the previous bill that we passed, which is the Valuation of Land Amendment Bill, and it is associated with the Valuation of Land Act. And we were trying to see the link between these definitions that we have here and its relationship to what exists in the body of the law. And we haven't seen any relationship between these concepts and what is contained in the various clauses or provisions. So we think it is rather redundant.
Let me help.
Yes.
The tax rates in Schedule 1, if you go to the back of the, do you have the original Property Tax Act?
Yes, I have the original.
If you go to the back in Schedule 1,
yes,
you'll see there's a definition of commercial, not definition, but it's an application of commercial land and industrial land and residential land. So the tax is associated with residential, commercial, and industrial. With respect to your first point, capital value, the legal people who are assisting me are looking at that point.
Okay.
It may not be necessary to have the capital value in this act, although this has been here since 2009.
That's right.
But we look, it may have been an oversight since then. Okay. So with respect to the capital value definition, we're looking at that. Okay. But there is a requirement to have residential, commercial, industrial, because that is applied in Schedule 1. Okay?
Okay.
But we look at the capital value.
And whilst we are looking for that, ma'am, can I go on?
Well, Senator Hussain wants to say something.
Sorry.
Minister, so your explanation with regards to the residential, commercial, industrial, do you think it would be prudent to now amend Schedule 1 to actually use the words residential land, because the definition has the word residential land. The schedule only has the word residential and commercial and industrial. It doesn't use the word land together with it.
You have to go to the Valuation of Land Act. For us to accept your proposal, we'll have to look at the Valuation of Land Act to see if by taking out the word land or adding it in the schedule, as the case may be.
It's just a,
no,
so
I understand what you're
yeah.
saying. The schedule says residential, commercial, industrial. It doesn't have the word land in it. But if you look at the definition of commercial land, residential land, etc., in the original act, it ties back into the Valuation of Land Act. So we'll just look and see why the word land is used in the definitions.
And not in the schedule.
Yeah, sure. We'll look at that. I am told, although I'm a bit nervous about this, so I'm going to ask them to double check and triple check that you might be right. That we don't need capital value. Well, a little nervous about that.
Senator Mark, can you move on to 5?
Yeah, Madam Chair, again through you to the Honourable Minister.
Yes, sure.
We do not understand, Honourable Minister, if you go to the original act or the parent act, you look at the definition of land, and you look at the definition of land under the Conveyancing and Law of Property, Chapter 5601, we've seen a variance. We've seen variations. And we were saying we don't understand why the inconsistency in terms of the definition of land.
Right, but this is an old act. This definition has been on the books now for 9 years. I am a little hesitant to tamper with it unless I understand the implications of tampering with it. If we could actually look at the definition itself, let's put aside your proposed definition for the time being. Let's look at what's there. It says all land, messuages, tenements, hereditaments, corporal and incorporeal of any kind, of every kind or description, or any estate or interest therein, together with all paths, passageways, ways, watercourses, liberties, and privileges, land covered with water, and all buildings or any part of any building, and all structures, machinery, plant, pipelines, cable, and fixtures erected or placed upon, in or over, under or fixed to land. So what are you saying now? Land of any tenure, houses, other buildings, mines and minerals, other corporal or hereditaments, a rent and other incorporeal.
Corporeal.
Where did you get this from?
From the Conveyancing and Law of Property, Chapter 5601.
What I'm being told is that the definition in the conveyancing legislation is an older definition and includes things that are not relevant to the Property Tax Act.
And excludes things that are.
Well, I'm hearing it excludes, but it includes things that are not relevant to this law. And I'm now hearing also excludes things that are relevant to this law. So this definition was developed specifically for the Property Tax Act. That's what I'm told. And this definition you've pulled here is quite an old definition from another piece of legislation. So I would leave it for now.
Just some conveyancing. You can convey surface rights and you can convey mineral rights if it's all ordinance land. So this takes into consideration minerals and mines.
Well, that was the thing that bothered me. Yeah. That you see, if you use this,
property tax has nothing to do with the mineral rights.
If you use this, you're going to be applying tax to oil, and I'm not sure we want to do that. Okay, so
in certain cases where people have private mineral rights,
well,
they can sell the surface rights and still keep the private mineral rights.
There are people that have oil wells on their land, their private land. You might have a deposit of gravel on your land, and what this is doing is attracting property tax to the value, not just of the land itself, but everything below. You know, any minerals or oil, hydrocarbons in it. So I wouldn't want to go there. That's going to make it worse. Okay? So if you could.
Last part of your amendment.
Yeah, accent to do the last part, the multi-owner.
Minister, with regards to if we look at subsection 2, the subsection 2C, a single commercial accommodation is part of a multi-owner building. Each single commercial accommodation shall for the purpose of liability, right? When I read that, it uses the word multi-owner building.
Yeah.
Now I wanted to understand why multi-owner. What if there's a building, a single owner, and there are multiple commercial apartments in that building? Would that person now not fall within this definition? So
no,
we just propose to take off multi-owner and just read as of a building.
No, I'll tell you why. You have many buildings where persons own that part of the building that they occupy, and then they have a share in the ownership of the common areas. And a typical condominium building is like that. So you own the condominium or apartment that you occupy. Then there would be other areas like a staircase, an elevator, a lobby, a parking area, and you would own a share of that. So you are a multi-owner. There are multiple owners inside of a building of that nature. You don't own the land below the building, but you own a share in the land below the building. So that's why multi-owner is
While I accept that, Minister, I believe that will be more applicable to subsection B, where it spoke of single dwelling
No,
accommodation.
but it could be commercial too.
So I was thinking if we remove multi-owner, it would be a wider definition.
No, what would happen is, if we remove multi-owner, is if you have a commercial building that is owned by different people, then each individual owner would not have a liability for his portion of the building. We are seeking to address that here.
If you, I don't know how familiar you are with the situation in the United States, but you could have a 50-story building and persons own a floor, and that's a commercial building. I am not sure how common that is in Trinidad and Tobago, but I'm sure there will be commercial buildings where people own a floor or part of a floor or something like that. So this is designed
to... we'll capture that? Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Madam President.
Senator Prescott.
Thank you very much. Would the Minister please tell us, does the term multi-owner not suggest that if the building is owned by several members of the same family or other unit, then such persons are individually regarded as owners? He seems to be thinking only of a situation where each unit of the building is owned by a separate commercial entity, and then they own common parts. But
yes,
if
that's
the family
process.
members of family A all own the building, does this, don't the words part of a multi-owner building point to them as well, that they are multi-owners?
What do you propose?
Well, when I first read it, until I heard you speak, I thought it was meant, that this paragraph was meant to say, this clause, pardon me, subclause, was really addressing multi-occupiers.
No, it's multi-owners.
And I realized from listening to you that it is not that. And that you are
because
saying
if you move along, it
perhaps
says each single commercial accommodation be deemed to be land.
So the purpose of this...
It's really multiple owners of one property.
The purpose of this part, therefore, is to impose the tax on each person who is in accommodation,
who owns a part of the building.
Part.
Yeah,
so the language really should be slightly different, because today it means all the members of my family, insofar as we own a single commercial building, jointly, when indeed that is not what you mean. You mean each of us has a discrete ownership in respect of a portion of that.
That is what we mean, but I would think if more than one person owns a building...
We may need to ask your parliamentary people.
I know, but I'm just making a point. I would think if a property is owned by a number of people,
it's a multi-owner
building, then that collective is liable to the tax. That group of people is liable to the tax.
And it becomes a multi-owner building?
Not in the sense we have here.
Well, in order to avoid the ambiguity, I think you're agreeing that we should at least look at it again.
Sure, of course. But
Ma'am, while I have your ear, may I move to something else regarding 3? Section 3?
Sure.
The reference that has been made a bit earlier to Section 31(2) caused me to inquire whether, insofar as Section 31(2) provides for rent to be collected, it is exigible by law. Is that what you mean, or do you mean amount to be received from the owner? It says, notwithstanding subsection 1, that is, the owner shall pay, the amount to be collected may be collected by the authorities, of course, from the tenant. Is that something that is exigible from the tenant, or you mean we may receive it from the tenant? So the tenant comes in and pays in the name of the owner. The use of the word collect suggests a mandatory obligation on the part of the tenant, that somebody may come up to him one day and said, I have come to collect the tax, and he or she may not say, I am not the person you want under 31. I think Senator Roach is of a similar view.
Well, if you look at 3,
yes,
subsection 3,
yes,
so that when I rent this building, there's an agreement between myself and the landlord as to who is liable.
Yes.
So that if you come along and you tell me, look, you're the tenant, I want the tax from you, but as part of my rental agreement, I am not liable for the tax, then you can't collect it from me.
So we seem to be shifting the burden to the tenant to demonstrate that it is not his responsibility when clearly the prime responsibility must be the owner. So we
we
may wish to say instead, Minister, we may wish to say instead, notwithstanding subsection 1, the amount to be collected from the owner may be received from the tenant. So I think people do this with the assessment. They tend to go into the warden's office and say, I came to pay the land tax in the name of John.
I got the point. I'm going to consult. What do you all think? If we change collected to received, you okay with that? Yes, we'll accept that change.
I'm much obliged to you. I have one further suggestion, again for clarification, in relation to clause 3, is what is recommended in the bill, as opposed to the current amendments, suggested amendments, are the new 3.1 and 3.2 to be regarded as part of the interpretation section? Pardon me, the 3.2, not 3.1. Is 3.2 an interpretation of something?
3.2?
Yes, in the bill, clause 3C speaks of an amendment to subsection 2. Well, an introduction of a subsection 2. And I wondered what it is defining or interpreting. It doesn't appear to be doing such a thing. It should be a standalone clause, shouldn't it? Section? I'm sure it's not just cosmetics.
It is an interpretation. It is deeming these types of properties to be land.
What? I beg your pardon, sir?
It is deeming these types of properties.
So it comes under the definition of appeal? Or what?
Appeal?
What is this definition in 3.2?
When 3.2?
Section 3 of the Act is the interpretation.
Yes, that's the interpretation section, and this is subsection 2.
Yes, the Parent Act, Section 3, in the marginal note, says a number of things, makes a number of references, and says we are interpreting these things. If you want to interpret appeal, you may look at the word appeal. If you want to interpret the word board, you know where to find it. What is the new, in the bill, what is 3C interpreting? The one that says where a building occupies separately from other buildings, a location, etc., etc. It seems to be a standalone section. And although marginal notes don't necessarily determine how we interpret an act, it might appear to be better laid out somewhere else. I don't know if there are any other legal people here who might have.
So you are saying that rather than put it in
3
as a definition.
Sorry, I'm saying it is not a definition, so it ought not to be in 3.
So rather than putting it into the definition section as a definition, it should be on its own.
Standing alone, yes. You may want to introduce a new 4 or whatever.
I don't agree.
This is the interpretation section of the original act, eh?
Yes, and Madam President, I'm saying, so what is 2 interpreting?
Subsection 2 is broadening the definition.
What is it describing, defining, making clear?
Broadening the definition of land.
What my people are telling me that we could, to avoid the interpretation that you have arrived upon.
My interpretation of the interpretation?
Yes, that's right. To avoid the interpretation that you have arrived upon, we could say for the purposes of the definition of land. Instead of where.
Might I recommend a new section, sir?
Can you put it in a new place? Where would you suggest we put it?
Oh, any number you like. A new 4. I wouldn't put it at the end. I would say a new 4.
It can't be too far away from this, you know.
Beg your pardon?
It can't be too far away from here, you know.
So,
I think, yes, members. I think,
3 big A is what I suggest.
Minister.
All right, I'm quite happy to make it 3A. 3 capital A. Instead of making it, instead of as it is in the Parent Act, 3, Section 3, subsection 2, I'll make it Section 3A.
I am much obliged to you. If your parliamentary drafts people are
we're going to sort that out.
So am I.
But we'll put a big A and make it 3 big A. Okay? All right. So we'll sort that out.
Okay,
all right
so, Minister, Senator Mark, we have gone through all the elements of your proposed amendment. Minister, you were to revert to Senator Mark on the issue of capital value, whether it should be deleted. You now also have to do some amendments with respect to 3.2. So I will stand this down so that the proper drafting can be done. Okay?
Sure.
So clause 3 is stood down.
Sure.
Clause 4.
The question is that clause 4 stand part of the bill. The question is that clause 4 now stand part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Clause 4 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 5.
The question is that clause 5 stand part of the bill. There are amendments circulated by Senator Mahabir and by Senator Mark. So, Senator Mark, I will treat with yours first. Yeah.
Yeah. Madam Chair, it is our view on the side that this is a very unnecessary development at this time. We feel that the government is really going to encourage large-scale land grabbing, squatting, because what this is given is a license. We have laws in this country that regulate squatting in this country, and what the government is seeking to do is impose a tax on persons who might be, in two instances, occupying land without, let's say, title. So on the one hand, Madam President, you have people with certificate of comfort, and they are waiting to go through the processes to get, for instance, regularized properly. That is one category we're talking about, and they haven't arrived there as yet. Then you have new visitors on the compound of the state, and these are people and so on who might not have satisfied the legal requirement under the law. I do not know what the government is seeking to capture here. They haven't indicated in terms of policy whether they are focusing, Madam Chair, on those legitimate persons who are in occupation, and they have what is called this letter of comfort, and they are going from one stage to another stage until they get title. Or whether the government is saying anyone, Madam Chair, who is in occupation of state land in Trinidad and Tobago, and the government is able to identify them, the army of personnel will be visiting you, and you will have to fill out whatever you have to fill out, and you will have to pay property tax. So the policy question is not too clear. And I think that we need to get clarification, because that is why we are proposing it be removed completely from the legislation.
Yeah,
Minister.
If we accept the arguments put forward as to why we would want occupiers of property to pay property tax because they're receiving services, why would we want to create a situation that if you collect property tax from an occupier, that might lead to that person getting title?
No, but what I'm saying is that I have asked a question, and I'd like you to clarify it for me. You and I are aware that you have about 30,000 or so persons, or even more, occupying lands that are not theirs.
30,000?
Or more.
As in one town?
Well, you have about 80,000.
More like 300,000.
Let's say about 80,000, 100,000, whatever. But the point I'm making, Madam Chair, and I'd like the Honourable Minister to clear it up for me. Are you saying that once you are occupying, Honourable Minister, this Section 5 would capture you? Once you are occupying, illegally, that would capture you? Or are you saying those persons who are in occupation of state property, state land, but they have certificates of comfort and they are moving towards getting title under their 30-year statutory leases? These are the people that you are targeting to pay taxes, not those people who might have been occupying property after the 1st of January 1998. That is what I'm saying as a policy.
Right,
let us clear.
Hold a second. How does that point affect this? Because all this is saying is that if you pay tax, you don't own property, you're on it, you have a house on it, we ask you to pay tax because you're receiving local government services. But we're saying the fact that you pay tax does not entitle you to get legal ownership of that property. How does this clause affect the point you are making?
But isn't that a conundrum we are finding ourselves in? I am in illegal occupation.
Right.
You are saying that I have to now pay taxes.
Yeah.
I am saying that that strengthens my hand to say, listen, you want me to pay taxes, government? Then you do things to regularize me. Get me my legal status, give me my statutory lease, make me a legal owner of my property in the Republic of TNT. Would not that be a legitimate expectation?
That is exactly what we're trying to avoid. Ms. Senator Roach, you wanted to say something?
Madam Chair, with your permission, if I can just shed some light, probably draw an analogy. In law, right, you can be an illegal occupier of property and somebody trespasses on your property, and you can have a legitimate action against that person, unless that person could come to show that they have a title over your illegal possession. So right away, an illegal person occupying land, in law, common law, is recognized as having some sort of a superior position to a trespasser. So even though he is not the owner of the land, he's in occupation of the land. And in law, there's a difference between ownership and occupation, possession and occupation. So in this instance, where the government is seeking now to attract taxes once you are on land, whether you are in the process of regularizing or whether you are not regularizing, the fact is that you are on land and you are accessing services, you are being visited with a tax, which is in itself is not, to me, offending the principle behind the ownership, the occupation, and the utilities that comes with the fact that you are in possession of land or occupation or enjoyment of land. So I'm just using the analogy of a trespasser trespassing on land that is illegally occupied. The person who is in illegal occupation has some right over that person who is trespassing. And therefore, there is rights already there for that person enjoying that land. And you can't dispossess that person unless you can show a superior title to be in possession. I don't know if Senior Counsel Prescott can add any clarification on what I'm saying here, because I know he's a...
I doubt it.
Has asked to speak. Senator Weaker.
Madam President, apologies, Senior Counsel, I really would not want to come after a Senior Counsel. So I basically just want to make the point of social contract. I understand the government's desire regarding the fiscal responsibilities. However, if they can consider as a social contract with the people to remove this clause, and that's basically it.
Senator Prescott.
But I say may or may not add some light. I gather that so far all the contributions appear to be thinking or surrounding occupation by one person of state lands
or private land.
It is very
private land too.
Dicey is the word I like to use. It becomes a very dicey proposition if you are on private lands, because the true owner may have fallen asleep on his rights, but he's entitled to do so for the next 16, I think is the correct number. Yes, before he takes a step. And when he has taken that step, whatever you may have done to enhance the value of the land does not necessarily revert or bring value to you, the trespasser that is. It appears to me that one has to be cautious because today people who used to pay taxes to the warden's office went in and managed to get a receipt that did not refer to the fact that this was not the true owner.
Correct.
And then eventually when the matter came to court and the true owner has sought to embark upon his rights, they are able to demonstrate a number of such steps that gave them some legitimacy. And then poor fellow, the private owner who has been sleeping has to go away and try to negotiate some compensation. In short, I'm hearing from all the contributors so far that they are concerned that what has been put down by way of clauses in the bill do not quite eliminate the chance of a squatter who has strategized his way to true ownership. No hurdle has been put in his way. In fact, what we have allowed him is a hands up.
Well, what I am picking up, Senator Prescott, is not that, I'm picking up quite the opposite, that they don't want us to say this, that if you're paying tax and you're not the owner of the land, that this does not give you a legal entitlement. They don't want us to say that.
That is correct. I am probably more on your side than theirs.
I thought you were.
Senator
I don't see
Richards.
why we wouldn't want to say this.
Senator Richards.
Thank you, Madam President. To both ministers, I appreciate the government's perspective that if someone is illegally occupying land and services are being provided by the state, that they should contribute because it would be unfair to those who are legally occupying. What is unclear to me and what is of great concern to me is the fact that, as Senator Prescott indicated, and I guess by extension Senator Roach, that the evaluation is done on the property, just like everyone else, to determine what should be paid. And there seems no clause or caveat to further limit that person from going and occupying more land. Because, well, it seems to subtly encourage me, although that's not the stated intention. And Minister West indicated in her presentation, winding up, that she knows of a gated community on illegally occupying. Well, if I were that gated community, I would expand. Let you value it and pay the land. And there should be some mechanism or clause in this to indicate that, to discourage that, because I know, and I love my people in Trinidad and Tobago, but I know in many people's instances that people are going to look at this as an encouragement or some type, or a subtle encouragement to continue or go on a land grabbing spree in some instances. And what is in this bill, and I know Minister West indicated that we are straddling two different liabilities legally here, but people may not be awkward with those nuances, and we may be subtly indicating, well, pay the tax, get your illegally occupied land valued, pay the tax, and then maybe I could grab another acre somewhere else. You will pay the tax. There should be something in this to indicate that if you extend that situation, you will be removed by the state or something, because as it is here, it is way too open to all kinds of interpretations by the public, erroneous at that, and we may be finding ourselves in a really sad situation with private lands, as Senator Prescott said, in addition to state lands, where we set off a chain of events that we find really untenable in the future.
Minister.
I'm sorry, I was getting some clarification here. Go ahead, Minister.
Yes. I hear you, Senator Richards, but the state already has the authority to take action against people who are squatting illegally. And what we need to do is take a clear decision as to how we will treat with them. So if somebody is in like the gated community and decides to expand, we already have the power to go after them. So to add a comment to that effect in the legislation, I don't think takes us any further. What we have to do is action the powers that we have.
May I inquire? Senator West, were you suggesting that there's law that permits you to go against squatters on private lands?
No, I was talking about the fact that squatting is illegal and therefore we can take action against the squatters. The example I'd given to Senator Richards earlier that he referred to had to do with state land.
Senator Roach?
Madam Chair, what I'm going to say out here is just to say that this clearly has to be a policy decision from the government. It clearly has to be
this is the government policy. We don't want to allow people to acquire rights to property just like that. I mean, the thing is going to find itself before court anyway. The person will make an argument that I've been paying tax, and it doesn't matter what the law says. You know how evolutionary our judicial system is these days.
Okay, so having said that,
you never know. Doesn't matter what's written here.
Having said that, Senator, we will now move on to the amendment circulated by Senator Mahabir to clause 5. Senator Mahabir.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, my position is similar to that raised by Senator Mark. Let me preface a bit by stating that it is recognized that squatters are trespassers and they are breaking the law. My amendment, therefore, is meant to levy a tax only on people who are occupying land with the permission of the landowner, not to anyone who is breaking the law. And the permission of the landowner would mean either on private land, a relative is occupying the land via some chattel with the permission of the owner as in extended families, and that there's a tax liability there. With respect to state lands, I am recommending that when someone who has occupied it illegally in the past and he has been given something like a letter of comfort, so he is in the process of being regularized, then I say that that individual who had broken the law in the past but is now recognized as being in compliance by the state, by the law with respect to letters of comfort and or other types of agreements, be then part and parcel of the mainstream law of revenue collection. And therefore my amendment is that only when someone is occupying the land with the permission of the owner, and the permission can take many forms, that the tax liability arises. See, Madam Chair, the squatters come in different guises. Senator Mark alluded to the point. There are those who have been on land for a number of years, and the state has a policy on that. And then there are those who are going to occupy tomorrow, and the state will have a policy on that. There are some squatters' buildings which cannot be demolished via action by anyone, and then there are some squatters' habitations which can be demolished. And I think in the interest of complying with the law, we seek some permission, at least with the owner, and in the interest of equity, if you were not to define who is liable, in the interest of equity, you may very well find squatters who have no letters of comfort paying their property tax dutifully according to the law and having their habitations demolished without much notice. So I am recommending my amendment as follows. There shall be a tax liability on the owner of any chattel, fixed or affixed to land, who is not the legal owner of the land, but is occupying the land with the permission of the landowner. And I would recommend that we, as Senator Mark alluded, we remove 5.2, but you replace it with my amendment. I wait for the government's response.
Madam Chairman, that would eliminate all squatters.
Including letters of comfort, but letters of comfort means that you have the permission of the owner of the land. It's a letter that you have been recognized. Yes. It's a legal instrument, so
what
it wouldn't eliminate
squatters
those.
on private land?
Well, squatters on private land would have to be not treated for tax purposes at all. They are trespassing. So they are illegally occupying someone's private land.
So what you are saying, and I mean, for us who are elected, it's not black and white, you know. When you go in, when you are elected and you go into a community, and I have many communities like this, Dundonald, St. James area, for example, not Donald Hill per se, because that's state, but there are other parts of my constituency, where people are on private land, and they have been on private land for 50 years. And I have to provide them with services because they're my constituents, they voted for me. I can't go and tell them, look, you're squatting on private lands. I don't recognize you as a human being, or I don't recognize you as a resident, and therefore I'm not going to put in roads and drains and water supply and electricity. I can't do that. There are many constituencies all over Trinidad, I'm sure all, where it is an obligation on the part of the MP to try uplift and improve the standard of living of the people who live there, and they're squatting on private lands. So if I went along with what you are saying here, you are saying that although the state may be obliged to upgrade the infrastructure and provide services in terms of garbage collection and so on and water supply to squatters on private lands, they shouldn't be taxed. I can't agree with that. That is the effect of your amendment.
Through you, Madam Chair, Minister, are you agreeing with an amendment which is to come that the revenue is to be dedicated to local government bodies so that these quarters will then benefit because it is tied in?
I will explain that when we get there.
Okay, very well.
We do have, I don't want to call it a halfway house, but we have a way where we can have a meeting of the minds, I believe.
Senator Mahabir, there's another component to your amendment.
Yes, with respect to Madam Chair 5B, if I may read it with your leave, Madam Chair.
Well, it's circulated.
It's circulated, yes.
Circulated.
You see, 5B really refers to persons 60 years and over, and I want to put on the record that I am not over 60, though I do hope to get there at some time. That these persons the tax liability shall not exceed 1% of the annual rateable value of the property. Let me defend that amendment, Madam Chair. Currently in Trinidad and Tobago, we provide a relief to retirees 60 and over with respect to electricity rates. The minister in one of his budget presentations did in fact indicate that TNTech was going to provide some rebate for electricity. Water rates, driver's license, passports. There's a reason for that because the minister, when she piloted, indicated that being retired simply means that you are no longer earning income. But what it implies is that you have wealth. It means that in addition to whatever pension you may receive, you do have a stock of wealth. My own feeling is that with respect to the retired population in Trinidad and Tobago, looking at what has happened over the last 30 years or so, it is hardly likely that you're going to find retirees with that large stock of wealth alluded to by the minister. You may find some, and therefore my concern is that, again, with respect to the claim on public services that these retirees are going to impose, you may have a large house, a number of empty rooms, children have grown up, they're not producing so much garbage, they're not producing so much potholes because they're not driving, and therefore, Madam Chair, I am recommending that the tax on the retirees not exceed 1%, because the additional concern I have is this. Any request for relief by an individual who is retired, my understanding is it is simply a deferred tax liability, and that when this property passes on, the person who has inherited will then be asked to pay whatever taxes were deferred. So in order to avoid property being passed on to a spouse or to a child with this tax liability, I am recommending for the consideration of the government that the tax liability be fair so it is affordable, and individuals will try in the current dispensation to the best of their ability to pay a 1% as opposed to seeking deferrals which will then become an encumbrance on the heirs. Thank you.
Minister.
All right. Senator Mahabir, there are many issues associated with your proposal. Let's start in the reverse order. If I am 60 years or over and I have industrial property which is generating income, I'm not a poor retiree, because you haven't said anything about means, you've just said age. So if I have an industrial property, the current rate is 6%. So if I were to agree with what you are saying,
all 60-year-olds and over who own industrial property would now go to 1%. If I am the owner of commercial properties, I'm a multimillionaire owning commercial properties, where the tax is now 5%, but I'm 60 and over, the tax would now go to 1%. So on that grounds alone, I can't accept the proposal. But I want to make a point. I remember when we introduced GATE in 2004, I was the minister at the time, and we had to make a decision whether we would have a means test or not. I had a certain policy objective to achieve, which was to increase the participation rate in tertiary education from then 11%, and we had a target of 60%. So we said, look, let's forget about this means test. It's too complicated. And we just said anybody who wants to apply for GATE can do so. And you had people doing 3 and 4 and 5 degrees. You had professional people, lawyers, doctors, accountants, going and accessing GATE just because it was free. And yes, we hit the 60%, but we then ended up with a GATE obligation of $700 million a year because there was no control whatsoever. So that this government has now decided to pull back on that, having achieved that participation. And we're now putting in a means test and so on, so that that benefit goes to the people that deserve it and need it. Similarly, in a budget in this government, and me as Minister of Finance came to the Parliament and said that if you're over 60, you're free driver's permit. And I even forgot about it. And as I was telling Senator Mahabir, because I am 60, that I went to renew my driver's permit a month ago, and I sent my driver the $500, get a 5-year permit for me, just pay for it, and then I will go and do the photograph and so on. And they send back the money. I said, why? They say, well, you're 60. So that I didn't have to pay for my driver's permit. So whether you're multi-millionaire or not now, free driver's permit. We did it for passports too. This government, coming into office, it was one of our manifesto promises. We said if you're 60 and over, free passport. You could go on the fast ferry or the slow boat or whatever you want to call it, to Tobago. Well, you have to be on the boat to benefit from what I'm about to talk about. Yeah, you have to have a boat so that you can go. And by the way, there is a boat, the Spirit running, and it's running good. But you can go, the Spirit is sailing, don't worry with that. You can go on the Spirit now, and it's free. Doesn't matter who you are. And you can go on the water taxi, because we did that as well. The water taxi from San Fran to Port of Spain. Doesn't matter who you are. And I remember when we did that, and again I had the privilege to do that as Minister of Works, make that free to everybody 60 and over. And one day I'm coming home, and my neighbors who are 60 and over said, hey, we just went on the water taxi, and we didn't have to pay for it, and they're not poor. So that, I'm just making a point. You could take this thing too far. You could take it too far. And one of the features of this legislation is that there is a means test. There is a hardship test. Yeah. And if you can't afford it, you're 60 and over and you can't afford it, you apply for the waiver. Mm-hmm. And with respect to the continuing obligation to pass on, the person who inherits it will have to do the same thing. Because the children or the heir of somebody may be a person of means. So that whereas the parents may not have enough income to pay the tax, the person who inherits may be able to do so. So that whoever inherits the property would then apply if they feel that they don't have means, they're underprivileged, they can't pay. And if they're deemed to be in an underprivileged situation, then the waiver will continue. So that, Senator Mahabir, I'm sorry. I mean, I've been part of this thing. As I said, I introduced GATE. I introduced free driver's permit. I introduced free ferry service. I introduced free passport. And you have to stop at some point in time, okay, and start introducing a means test. Madam Chair, I just need to get clarification on a point raised by the Minister. He says there is going to be a means test, but I have not seen any form I have not seen any mechanism by which this means test is going to be applied. I'm hearing about it now, but I would have thought that as part of this legislation, I know the minister may be able to make regulations, but is it that we are going to get the requisite information before the Parliament so we can see exactly the information that is required for someone to apply for the means?
Hold a second, let me find the relevant section, the one where you could apply for relief. Which section is it? 24? 23, 24? I know. Yeah, the board may, upon application of the owner of land, authorize the deferral of the payment of the assessed tax on the land on the grounds of the impoverished condition of the owner and his inability to improve his financial position significantly by reason of age, impaired health, or other special circumstances. And if I go now to the which one is it? Yes, and 53 allows the minister to make regulations for the better carrying out of the purposes of this act. I can assure you I don't like judicial review applications. I get them all the time. I have to hire expensive lawyers to deal with it, so that we would certainly make regulations, but the regulations will come in due course and will come to this House for debate. And at that time, we can deal with this whole question of what are the criteria and the factors that would apply in applying Section 23 of the Act.
Madam Chair, may I ask the Honourable Minister, if you go to Section 53 of the Parent Act, because as you were on that point, I just thought I should raise it with you, and I'm happy that you mentioned judicial review and that it will be subject to debate. But there's no amendments so far, and I'd like to, with your leave, suggest an amendment to 53 consistent with your submission, where the regulations to be made by the minister shall be subject to an affirmative.
Negative.
Senator Mark,
Negative.
you, in your list of amendments, you have a proposed amendment to clause 24. So what you are speaking about now will be discussed later in the proceedings. Honourable Senators, I think we've had enough discussion on the amendments to clause 5.
Chairman,
yes?
I was trying to get your attention before you went to the second part with Senator Mahabi.
Yes.
And it is for clarification from the Minister in your response to the issue of owners occupiers having to pay tax, whether they are illegally occupying state land or private land. The owner, if it is a private property, the owner of the land would have to pay taxes, and the occupiers would have to pay taxes. So, because the law says that the occupiers would have to pay property tax, but they don't have any entitlement or any claim to the property. So you could have situations where both the owner as well as the illegal occupiers would have to pay tax.
Because you have to get onto the valuation rule.
Yeah, but there's no indication as to, for instance, if the occupiers are paying, then the owner.
No, it flows from the Valuation of Land Act. You have to get onto the valuation rule first.
So you would either put the occupier onto the rule or the...
You can't put both. So that the tax, after the valuation is done, the valuation of the property is done, then you are liable for property tax. So you have to get onto the roll first.
Yes.
You can't have both of these people on the roll.
We also have a similar situation with respect to payroll taxes. The legislation makes both the employer and the employer liable. But that doesn't mean the Board of Inland Revenue collects the tax from both persons. It has the ability to collect it from both of them, but it does not. It will collect from one of the two of them.
So in a situation, I just want to clarify, in a situation where you have persons illegally occupying private land, of course there are options for the owner to take action, to go to court, there are options for the occupiers to apply for the title to be extinguished based on adverse possession and so on. And where does the opportunity come in for an owner? Because we have situations where the owner of the land would have been trying to get the occupiers, illegal occupiers, off his land. And when the assessment takes place, when the home of the occupier is visited, the assessment takes place and you are putting him on the roll, what opportunity does the owner have to say, that person should not be, this is my land, I am paying tax? Where does that happen?
In terms of the assessment rule?
Yes, whose responsibility is it? Is it the state or would it be the owner? Where there is a conflict with regards to the title, or where the, because if the agent of the state, the assessor or whoever he is, physically goes to the land, they will meet the occupier, the illegal occupier, squatter. However, they would not meet the owner of the land in many instances. Whose responsibility is it to ensure that the right person is taxed or that you don't have double taxation?
Well, the law puts the obligation on the owner of the land to declare his land and ensure that he is properly represented on the valuation roll. So if the land is if no documentation is provided to the state and we go out and we see this land, you are right, we will meet the occupier and we'll take that information from him. But it is always open to the legal owner to come and correct the record.
Okay.
Is it a different?
Madam President, the question that I would like to ask is, how exactly are we going to collect the taxes from the squatters? Now, I can see that there might be some ease with respect to those who hold the certificate of comfort, because you will have someone registered, their name will be registered, you will have an address for them. Now, when we look at the Valuation of Lands Act, a person who is squatting, who does not have a certificate of comfort, under the Valuation of Lands Act, he has to fill out a valuation return form. This person does not fill out the form. Under the Act, there are certain penalties. So, for example, we have 2 or 3 persons occupying the house, no certificate of comfort. Who are we now going to address this notice to in order for them to come and fill out this valuation return form? Because this person, you have no record of them. How are you going to get these persons to fill out the form for them to come and pay the tax?
The valuation rule has to be created by the commissioner.
No, I'm talking about the under the Valuation of Lands Act.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So the valuation rule has to be created by the commissioner.
But wouldn't that rule be completed only when the valuation return forms are submitted to the Commissioner of Valuation?
The commissioner has the power also to value land. And that's under Section 29. But the scenario that you are describing, I think, is a bit unlikely. Because if the Commissioner of Valuations has to go and value properties, it would certainly start with the easiest ones first.
Exactly.
The ones that people have a deed, then you go down to the various categories, down to the certificate of comfort. I don't think there would be any intention to go and deal with complex ownership issues where there's no documentation at all. You don't know who it is. I don't think we'll get there.
So is it that we will stop at those who only have certificate of comfort?
I'm not saying I don't think we will get there immediately. I think at some point in time, I'm not sure it would be within the next 10 years that you would be dealing with that kind of convoluted occupation of land.
Well, then this would now avoid persons actually making applications for certificate of comfort, because they will now say, if I apply for the certificate of comfort, I'll be liable to property tax. If I don't get my certificate of comfort, I can stay on the land and I pay no taxes.
But you would never get title, because again, as a elected member, what is most important to squatters is title, because you can't go to the bank and develop the property if you don't get title.
I agree.
So that I don't think the scenario that you are projecting is likely. I don't think that will be the first priority of the Commissioner of Valuations, to go after persons where there's no documentation and the actual occupation is contested. 5 different families in one building, on a piece of land with no documentation whatsoever. I don't think any self-respecting commission of valuations would tackle that first. I think it'll start with people who have proper deeds and then go down the chain until you get to that complex situation you're talking about.
Thank
so
you,
I don't think
Minister.
it's a problem.
Thank you. And at this stage, members, it is time. There's been adequate discussion on the proposed amendments to Clause 5. So we will deal first with the amendments circulated by Senator Mark. The question is that Clause 5 be amended as circulated by Senator Mark. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. The amendments proposed, circulated by Senator Mark, have not been accepted.
With the exception, as I said, I'm a little nervous about this.
No, we're dealing with
worry the capital.
So, Minister.
Oh, 3. That's 3. Yeah, my. It's all right.
Well, could I just tell you all how it is? And how it is very difficult to keep track. So I would ask for you all to take some guidance from me. So the amendments as circulated by Senator Mark have not been accepted. I now move on to the amendments proposed and circulated by Senator Mahabir to Clause 5. The question is that Clause 5 be amended as circulated by Senator Mahabir. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. The amendments as circulated by Senator Mahabir have not been accepted. The question, therefore, is that Clause 5 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no.
No. Division.
Mr. Khan?
Yes.
Mrs. Gopi Schoon?
Yes.
Mrs. Batiste Primus?
Yes.
Mr. Rambarat?
Yes.
Mr. Sinanan?
Yes.
Mr. Kazim Hussain?
Yes.
Ms. West? Mr. LeHunt?
Yes.
Dr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Singh?
Yes.
Mr. Cummins?
Yes.
Mr. De Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Duki?
Yes.
Mr. Huggins?
Yes.
Mr. Moses?
Yes.
Mr. Mark?
No.
Ms. Haynes?
No.
Ms. Amin?
No.
Mr. Saddam Hussein?
No.
Mr. Obika?
No.
Mrs. Zakur?
No.
Dr. Mahabir?
No.
Mr. Roach?
Yes.
Mr. Small?
Yes.
Mr. Shriki-Soon?
Yes.
Ms. Ramkisoon?
No.
Ms. Choot?
Yes.
Ms. Raful?
Abstain.
Mr. Richards?
Yes.
Mr. Prescott?
Yes.
21, 8, 1 abstention.
Honourable Senators, 21 senators voted for Clause 5, 8 senators voted against, and 1 senator abstained. Clause 5 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 6.
The question is that Clause 6 stand part of the bill. There are amendments proposed to Clause 6 by Senator Mark and the Minister of Finance. Senator Mark, let us deal with your amendment, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I found it very interesting that in the Parent Act of 2009-2010, the government at that time, in its wisdom, sought to exempt land belonging to the University of the Southern Caribbean from the property tax. I don't know if it is an oversight on the part of the Minister of Finance and the government, but mysteriously, the University of the Southern Caribbean was left out. So I have included the University of the Southern Caribbean, and the same language, land belonging and occupied by that university, should be exempted, or should be exempt, I should say, from the payment of property taxes. I am also proposing, and I want the Honourable Minister to be very aware, that there are some countries, I've done the research in terms of New South Wales, and you do not have trade unions, and you do not have like organizations like the chambers, whether it's TTMA or the Chamber of Industry and Commerce. They do not pay taxes, land taxes, or land and bill. In South New South Wales, we call it land tax. Now, you know, Madam Chair, that trade unions are more or less a kind of form of NGOs, right? They do not really make money. They do not really engage in that kind of activity as you will find in the commercial sector. They depend, as you know, on their members for dues, and they use that dues to run their operations. Right. So what I am suggesting, Madam Chair, for the Honourable Minister's consideration is that land, right, belonging and being occupied by trade unions / associations in Trinidad and Tobago and their servants not be incorporated or not be included for property tax purposes. I am asking that they be exempted, right, or they be exempt from paying such property tax. And as I said, I looked at the New South Wales legislation, and they have exempted both trade unions and business organizations. So if the minister wants, he could include business in this amendment. But I'm promoting the trade unions here for exemption. So I'd like to ask the Honourable Minister to consider that.
Senator Richards, in respect of the amendment proposed by Senator Mark.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Let me declare my interest. I'm a past student of the University of the Southern Caribbean, so I don't want that to be hidden. And I'm endorsing Senator Mark's attempt to have the university included and lands associated with the university, because although it is not a state or government owned or administered institution, it is a strong supporter of the community of Maracas St. Joseph and provides significant social, educational, emotional support to the community in many initiatives. So I am endorsing Senator Mark's petition for it to be included in the list of exempted universities. And also, it may be a private institution, but it has never sought, because it's a faith-based institution, sought to be a profit-generating institution as much as an academic and socially conscious institution. So I'm endorsing that. The other part about the trade unions, not so much. Actually, not at all.
Senator Small.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to join with Senator Richards, and I will declare that while I am not a past student, I have had the privilege of being invited to the University of Southern Caribbean to deliver lectures, and I understand they do quite a bit of outreach work, and they're really supportive of the community. So I think that it's not often I support a proposal by Senator Mark, but if you recall during my contribution, I had asked the question, and I heard the minister's response, and I would like for the minister to consider again with respect, if possible. I think that this is an institution that it encompasses more than the physical land that it is. It's a fictional community, and because they do a lot of work, they offer a lot of programs for young people. You know, we have a challenge with young people in Trinidad and Tobago, and they provide outreach services. I think this deserves some consideration. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Minister. Senator Choate.
If I may just put in my 2 cents, I mean, I too have an interest to declare. The first principal was a family friend, but at the same time, I live in the Maracas St. Joseph community, and I am able to see that the university has expanded considerably from where it had initially started off, which means that it is doing well financially. And while it is true it is faith-based and it does there are programs for the community, if we were to treat this educational institution in a particular way, then we may be asked why it is that we are not treating similar faith-based educational institutions in the same way. So I unfortunately disagree with my fellow independents on this matter.
Senator Richards, briefly, please. Yes?
Madam President, thank you. Just to add to counter what Senator Choate is saying with respect, it may have seemed to expand, but it may not be doing as well financially as we think. And I'm just asking either minister if there could be some sort of petition, if not granted carte blanche, for some sort of accommodation to be made for the university, petition for deferral, as with other entities, in some way in the legislation. So it may not be a carte blanche thing, but if the university finds itself in a precarious situation financially or otherwise, it may in some way qualify for a deferral.
Minister.
I was going to argue it myself, because I too support reintroducing the University of the Southern Caribbean. And Senator Choate has now confused me. I was going to go along with the recommendations made by Senator Small, Senator Richards, and say put it back. But I'll give you a reason. I'll give you a reason why it should go back in. And the reason is that the government of Trinidad and Tobago, again, ironically, I was part of that government, made a decision to support the University of the Southern Caribbean as the 3rd university in Trinidad and Tobago. We had University of the West Indies. We created University of Trinidad and Tobago. And then there was a view, again, this is all part of the Manning administration and all part of the policy to try and increase enrollment in tertiary education. So there was the creation of UTT as a purpose-built technical university serving industry. And then there was the view, look, let's try and get as many universities going as possible to try and get enrollment up. And we as a cabinet, I think the number I'm remembering in my head, we put $100 million into the expansion of the University of the Southern Caribbean. So what you saw there is not really a rich institution getting money from tuition fees and from donors. It was the government, and it might even be more than $100 million that the Manning government put towards the development program of the University of the Southern Caribbean that allowed them to expand their campus to where it is right now, right there in Maracas Valley. And if you look at the definition of if you look at Section 16 of the Parent Act, you will see that 16(1)(b) speaks to school buildings, offices, and playgrounds of school within the meaning of the Education Act. So that is currently an exemption that has been there since the enactment of this original act way back in 2009. And that covers denominational schools. That covers schools approved by the Minister of Education, even private schools. So that schools at the secondary level and primary level, once they're approved by the Minister of Education, they're exempt from property tax. So I think there is a lot to be said for including the University of Southern Caribbean. It's not a rich university. It might just have appeared so because of the money pumped into its development program by the then government. But that program is no longer in place. There's no longer any program in our development program to keep funding the University of the Southern Caribbean. So I would want to agree with Senator Wade Mark. I don't know why. I'm getting a headache. I'll probably have to call for some Limacol and sap my head. But I'd like to put back what was there before. We don't have to add in this and its servants. Let's just put back what was there before. Lands belonging to the University of the Southern Caribbean. With respect to the trade union side of things. Yes, Senator Roach?
But is it already there in the end?
No, but in the law. You see, in the actual Property Tax Act, because we are deleting it in the bill before the Senate, what was being deleted was lands belonging to the University of the Southern Caribbean. So I'm just saying, let's put it back as it was.
Minister, you want to add and occupied by?
Occupied, yes, and occupied. Yeah. And lands belonging to and occupied by the University of the Southern Caribbean. And with respect to trade unions, I was just reminded by Senator Khan that the Petrotrin bond of the equivalent of 5 billion Trinidad and Tobago dollars is held by the Teachers Union of the United States. So that there is no magic formula that one can apply to any particular trade union. There are some trade unions that are quite wealthy. There are some trade unions that are struggling. And if you add in business organizations, I mean, where are you going to go with this thing? Why business organization? Why not sporting clubs? Why not a football club? So, you know, you could take this thing too far. And I don't think we should agree to land belonging to trade unions. I understand your point. I mean, it was I that decided to give funding to NATOC and JTOM in our first budget because we recognize we need to help trade unions. But I don't think this is the place for that. I don't think so. Because where are you going to stop?
Madam Chair, I never advocated for the business side of it. And you understand? Okay.
Has answered what you have raised with respect to the Part B of your proposed amendment. Minister, you have proposed amendments to
yes, mine is just typographical, I believe.
Yes.
What am I doing here? Are we amending?
You're substituting the word. You're substituting of to by.
Yeah. So it's land belonging to the state and in an occupation of should be in an occupation by. So that's why we're doing that. And then we're taking out state enterprises controlled by the state for public purposes and replacing that with state enterprises listed in Schedule 4. So instead of a definition that could be subject to interpretation, we are actually making it specific and listing the state enterprises that this thing would apply to. So that's the purpose of this amendment.
Okay.
Our amendment to 6.
All right, so Honourable Senators, I'm going to put the amendments to Clause 6 to the vote. I will deal first with the amendments circulated and proposed by the Minister of Finance. So the question is that Clause 6 be amended as circulated by the Minister of Finance. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The amendments proposed by the Minister of Finance have been accepted. And now, Senator Mark, I will propose your amendment as further amended, but I will have to do it in two parts from how I understand the discussions. So, Honourable Senators, the question is that Clause 6 be amended as circulated by Senator Mark and further amended to read as follows. A, in subsection 1, insert a new paragraph N N, land belonging to the University of the Southern Caribbean and occupied by the University of the Southern Caribbean.
This land belonging to and occupied by.
Is that,
land belonging to and occupied by.
Madam Chairman, just give me a minute, because I think in our amendment bill, we're taking out something that was there before. So if we just take it out of the amendment bill, that might solve the problem.
We still need to amend it by putting these words in.
So do we have an amendment to 5? Where is it anyway?
Your amendments have already been accepted.
That is to 6. Right.
Yes.
What I'm saying is that in the bill, we would have been, the bill in clause 6 would be taking out University of the Southern Caribbean. What's it doing? Where is it taking it?
It's deleting N.
Or it's deleting paragraph N. So let's just take out, in our bill, let's take out 6A Roman 8.
And then you need to amend it.
Because
but it's different.
It does it matter?
It will. When you want it out, it will be advanced.
Look at what is there. No, it's this one.
Right, but everybody else's land belonging to an occupied by.
We want to delete from the bill, clause 6 of the bill, 6A Roman 8. But I'm being told that we should put in the words unoccupied by. So instead of the words deleting paragraph N, I would put in paragraph N, inserting after the words to, after the words to, the words unoccupied by. So what it would read is, lands belonging to and occupied by the University of the Southern Caribbean. So instead of in section 6 where we have 6A Roman 8, deleting paragraph N, replace that with the words in paragraph N by inserting the words
after the word to.
After the word to, the words unoccupied by. So in other words, it's very similar to what we were doing before. So instead of the words deleting paragraph N, so we take out that. So we delete the words deleting paragraph N and then insert the words in paragraph N by inserting after the word to the words unoccupied by. Okay? So that brings back in the University of the Southern Caribbean. And I'll have to take 3 Panadol for that because I agreed with Mark on something. A Fensic, you know what? I'll take Fensic here. Fensic, you know, I'm going to hear that. Funky? When last you sell Fensic?
Oh, yeah. Lands belonging to and occupied by the University of the Southern Caribbean. Yes?
So this is 8, right?
Yes.
So it'll be deleting the words, deleting paragraph N, and then we're just adding the words in paragraph N by inserting after the word to and occupied by.
Unoccupied by.
Okay.
So the entire N would now be lands belonging to and occupied by the University of the Southern Caribbean.
So, honorable senators, the question is that clause 6 be amended as circulated by the Minister of Finance and further amended as follows. At 8, sub 8, yeah, 16A sub 8, correct? By deleting the words, deleting paragraph N and substituting the words in paragraph N by inserting after the word to and occupied by. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Clause, the amendment as circulated by the Minister of Finance and further amended as read out has been accepted. I now have to put the amendment as proposed by Senator Mark. Senator Mark, do you wish to go through with the amendment?
Of course. This is a very serious amendment.
So we will just be dealing, though, you will withdraw, can you withdraw the first part of your amendment because that has been dealt with?
I do.
And we will just deal with your B.
Yes.
So, Honourable Senators, the question is that Clause 6 be amended as circulated by Senator Mark by deleting A, 6A, so we are only dealing with 6B. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no.
No. Division.
Mr. Khan?
Yes. No. 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 Sorry. You caught me there.
That's all right.
Yeah, well, look me well, yes, coming here.
Say no properly.
The fearless one.
Mrs. Gopi Skoon? Mrs. Gopi Skoon?
No.
Mrs. Batiste Primus?
No.
Mr. Rambarat?
No.
Mr. Sinanan?
No.
Mr. Moses?
No.
Mr. Kazim Hussein?
No.
Ms. West?
No.
Members, please.
Mr. Lahunt?
No.
Dr. Henry?
No.
Mr. Singh?
No.
Mr. Cummins?
No.
Mr. De Freitas?
No.
Mr. Duki?
No.
Mr. Huggins?
No.
Mr. Mark?
Yes.
Ms. Haynes?
Yes.
Ms. Amin?
Yes.
Mr. Saddam Hussein?
Yes.
Mr. Obika?
Yes.
Mr. Zakur?
Yes.
Dr. Mahabir?
No.
Mr. Roach?
No.
Mr. Small?
No.
Mr. Sri Kisoon?
No.
Ms. Ram Kisoon?
No.
Ms. Chote?
No.
Ms. Raful?
No.
Mr. Richards?
No.
Mr. Prescott?
No.
24 voting against, 6 voting for.
Honourable Senators, in respect of the amendment circulated by Senator Mark to Clause 6, 24 members voted against the amendment, 6 members voted for. So the amendment has not been accepted. Honourable Senators, the question is that Clause 6, as amended, now stand part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Clause 6, as amended, now stands part of the bill. So I think this is a good time, Honourable Senators, to take a break, refresh ourselves, clear our minds, and in the spirit of generosity, we will resume at 5:30.
Going along fine.